Welcome to everyone joining us from all over the world. We're here in Orečova Poton at a beautiful Slovakia Ring for the FIA CEZ endurance race that closes out Saturday's program. We're here on the 5.9 kilometer racetrack in Slovakia and we're ready for what is yet another endurance race, but this one is very, very special. We have, for the first time in the history of the championship, a 3-hour race ready to keep us company for the next 3 hours or so. With triple points available, this is going to be a fantastic time for our drivers, for us spectators, and of course a great opportunity for them to score as many points as possible. Of course, just like any other FIA CEZ endurance race, we have so many different categories here at the Slovakia Ring, starting off with the LMP3 class. ARC Bratislava starting off on pole position with the Konopka family driving the car and ready to take home the victory should everything go according to plan. Though they're not the only ones here fighting for a race win. Of course, we have GT3 cars as well, with Lamborghini and BMW on the front foot. Not just them, however, we also have some Super Trofeo cars, Porsche Cup cars, of course, racing in the Cup standings, and last but not least, some GT4 pieces of machinery. We saw Mercedes bringing out their AMG GT4 car, of course, Aston Martin as well being here on the starting grid with Yannick Motorsport, and last but not least, right behind me, the Praga R1 Turbo, one of the most incredible cars, ready here to take on the fight for the FIA CEZ endurance race. As I told you guys before, 3 hours of racing here with triple points available for all teams that are capable of finishing the race. We're going to have the first hour of racing with the normal FIA CEZ rules, with the pit window for a mandatory pit stop between 25 and 35 minutes of racing, and after that it's anyone's game up until 3 hours of racing. Join us for this incredible atmosphere, and of course watch out for the weather because it's starting to be a bit darker in the sky, and of course this could be a sign of rain to come during these 3 hours. Everything is ready, we are ready, the cars behind me are ready, so let's go race here for the FIA CEZ 3 hours here at the Slovakia Ring. And here we are on the starting grid for this FIA CEZ endurance race. As we told you guys before, on the starting grid, the format is going to go like this. The first hour is going to be the normal FIA CEZ 1 hour classification, which we saw already at the Red Bull Ring, for example, a couple of weeks ago. And then from that point on, it's going to be anyone's game with strategies open to everyone for both fuel, tires, and driver's change. Here we see the starting grid made of 14 cars. This is the Praga R1 Turbo of the team number 65, driven by Roman Rubicek, with the Praga R1 Turbo by JMT Racing Club. A very iconic car that unfortunately could not partake in qualifying, though it has been given the exemption of making the start for this race. As we see now, the team getting ready for them to start off this amazing race. We also have a Clio Cup car ready to go, the only one in the championship. That's Lema Racing with car number 23, driven by Duško Banjaglav and Hrvoje Belinic. The Renault Clio 5 for Lema Racing. We saw in qualifying how important here power really is, and we saw the LMP3 class reign supreme, but not by much, over the GT car of Racing Trevor, but generally beating the GT3 cars by just 1.5 seconds. As you can see, Ark Bratislava bringing 2 different types of machinery. The LMP3 car in first place, as you can see on the top left-hand corner, and naturally the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 in third place, as Ark Bratislava is going to tackle the race with both cars. And here you can see the inside of the KTM Crossbow, driven by Viktor Mraz and Macho Homola from 6th position, car number 26. The Carrion Racing team with their iconic purple livery, and a car that is quite difficult to drive, though it has produced some great results, especially in recent years. Of course, a much different concept of a car compared to what we are used to seeing. As here you can see Racing Trevor with their number 500. That is Antal Gigo and Max Hesse in the BMW M4 GT3 Evo that we are about to see after looking at the Carrion Racing KTM Crossbow. Car that is getting ready to go, as the grid itself is getting ready to begin its formation lap before the 3 hours of racing here at the Slovakia Ring. As you can see here from the drone cam, we see the 2 different cars lining up on the front row of the grid. The Ligier LMP3, of course, a car that has no introduction needed, as it is one of the best prototypes around, just a bit slower than the LMP2 car, whereas the GT3 has been the staple of GT racing in the last few decades, especially the BMW M4 GT3 Evo, which has started off its cycle this year, given that it is an evolution to a car introduced now 3 years ago. BMW taking many different victories around the world on both European and global stages. As now we can see the drivers having to turn their car on, with the grid being now emptied, as different team members are leaving the grid and going back to the boxes, as now we're getting ready to start this formation lap, the final one of the day, that sees, of course, these 14 cars getting ready to race, as we will see the 15-second board as well, meaning that the drivers will be ready to start. Here it is, shown at the start of the grid, and then the safety car will lead us away for what is the final race of the weekend, of Saturday, of course, for the incredible program of this weekend that features an FIA series as the main event, such as the FIA European Truck Racing Championship, but then also sees the Clio Cup, the Twingo Cup, the TCR European Endurance, and of course the FIA CEZ Endurance, which is getting ready to start right about now as the information lap begins, and we are ready to discover this 5.2 kilometer racetrack situated in Orecova Potoń, Slovakia. The Slovakia Ring is made up of 14 corners, 7 to the right, 7 to the left. We race in a clockwise manner, and it is a racetrack that is quite new on the motorsport scene. It was built between 2008 and 2009 and opened on October 1st, 2009. It has hosted a plethora of races of the utmost importance. We remember, of course, from the past, the FIA WTCR race of Slovakia that has been going on from 2012 to 2020, with the exception of the 2017 season. Most notably also the Blank Pain GT Series, the former championship of the GT World Challenge, came here in 2014, whereas right now we see the starting grid of the first ever 3-hour race for FIA CEZ Endurance. Naturally, we are ready to go here with the formation lap already in its middle part. We were speaking about the different championships that came here throughout the years, and naturally the FIA European Truck Racing Championship being one of the staples of this racing track in the last decade, racing here from 2017 apart from the 2 seasons played by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 2021. Then naturally other Eastern Europe series coming here, such as TCR Eastern Europe, F4 CEZ, the Clio Cup and the Twingo Cup, which are both racing this weekend. And from this year, the inclusion of the TCR European Endurance as the new continental series for endurance racing that started off last year is now here for its first time at the Slovakia Ring, as we now see the safety car having 2 different cars behind it. On one hand, the LMP3 ARC Bratislava prototype, and on the other, the super quick BMW M4 GT3 Evo. So we're ready to go here at the Slovakia Ring. We just need cars to complete the final couple of corners in the formation lap, as we're going to see the ARC Bratislava piece of machinery ready to lead things off from the start. Second place for the BMW M4 GT3 Evo of Racing Trevor, and behind them ARC Bratislava with the Lamborghini Huracan and the BMW M6 GT3 of Racing Trevor once more, as they also line up on the second row. Watch out for Goodspeed Racing Team and Karin Racing in 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th position, as lights go out right about now, and we are racing for 3 hours here for FIA CEZ Endurance. It's a great getaway for the Ligier LMP3 of ARC Bratislava, who leads the way towards turn number 1. However, the BMW is very quick on a straight line, and so it's going to be quite difficult for the LMP3 Ligier to keep them behind as the drivers go towards turns number 2 and 3, though of course in acceleration the LMP3 piece of machinery is much quicker. Same goes for the Praga, who has already gained a couple of spots against the Clio Cup and the different GT4 cars, as we now go through towards turn number 3 with the Ligier LMP3 still in the lead ahead of Antalgigo Max Hesse in the BMW M4 GT3 Evo. Of course, Max Hesse being a professional BMW driver, and Antalgigo one of the Racing Trevor experienced competitors, especially in such a championship. Here we go with ARC Bratislava, a team that needs no introduction. Of course, they've raced in many different categories throughout the years, and in European endurance events as well, whereas here we are with the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing with Victor Mraz and Macho Homola.
was so good to see the onboard of the Karen Racing KTM Crossbow, as it was such a phenomenal car to drive for both Victor Mraz and Macho Homola, as we're back on board with them on the bottom right hand corner, whereas on the top left we are live with the images of the race as the cars are now going through the penultimate corner of the racetrack for the first ever time in anger in this race, as we go towards lap number 2. Here we go with the Lamborghini of Arc Bratislava as well, with Miro Konopka and Adnan Konopka sharing duties in between the two Arc Bratislava cars, the Ligier LMP3 and the Lamborghini Huracan, of course all being in different categories. As you can see, car number 220 of Gregor Žigo, Denis Vajek and Jess Kron for Racing Trevor so far in 3rd position, gaining 1 spot over the Lamborghini Huracan of Arc Bratislava here, followed by the cameras. So far so good though in what is a very long race. Drivers really have to focus on bringing the car home. Let's not forget this event has a triple points ahead of this round. Many were wondering whether this could be the defining moment of the championship. And for sure, this is going to be a very important one, with 75 points on the table for the winning team in each class, instead of the usual 25-point payout that they have, of course, in the normal FIA CEZ 1-hour races that we have throughout the season and that we've had in Austria at the Red Bull Ring no longer than 3 weeks ago. So far we're with the Cup cars as well, the GTX classes, including, for example, the Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo of Jakob Knöll and Josef Zaruba, car number 22 of Mikanek Motorsport, whereas the Porsche that we saw behind is the 991.2 Cup of Aditis Racing, a team that is and has always been on the front foot in Eastern Europe racing. We saw them in TCR Eastern Europe last year. We're seeing them now here in the FIA CEZ Endurance Series and the GT Cup Series as well. A championship that has enjoyed a thorough rebrand compared to last year. It was called the Asset Cup, as of course this year the GT Cup Series has enjoyed a new run of form, with the 2 sprint races joined by the endurance event. As here you can see the Seoul Clio Cup racing here for the entire 3 hour of racing. Car number 23 of Duško Banjeglav and Hrvoje Belinč. Whereas here we have the fight between the Lamborghini Super Trofeo and the Porsche Super Cup. Aditis Racing with car number 38, the dark grey and bright yellow livery that is typical of the team, the Czech team. You can see down towards turn number 10, this very sharp hairpin to the left before turns 11 and 12, which bring the cars to the back straight, up the hill, and then down towards turn number 13. Are we about to see the first battle? Well, the answer is yes, but not with the cars that we were hoping it would be, or more than hoping, expecting it to be, as we have a good speed racing team with the Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo of Piotr Vira racing against car number 7 of Arc Bratislava, as the latter has lost the position throughout the previous lap, but now not only he gains it back, but then he tries to defend it into turn 1, but the Mercedes once again brings the overtake home So Piotr Vira back in front of Konopka, with the purple and blue Mercedes being now up into fourth, as Lamborghini is instead down to fifth position. ARC Bratislava, though, still in the lead of the race after its first 7 minutes. Naturally, ARC Bratislava has a long tradition in racing, with the Ligier LMP3 being as well one of the best cars to do so with. The home team, of course, for this race here at the Slovakia Ring. It needs to be said how important this race weekend is for ARC Bratislava, not just for the championship, but for their home pride as well. It naturally becomes imperative for them to take home a very important result here. We go on board once again with the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing. The racing goes on, as now we see the Lamborghini Super Trofeo and the Porsche Super Cup being hunted down by the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing, which has lost a position throughout the opening couple of minutes. As we now go towards the start-finish line, you can see how quick the KTM really is. Though, of course, the Cup cars are much better through the corners. Here we see Karin Racing trying to at least make up some ground in these opening 9 minutes of racing. The Lamborghini Super Trofeo of Mikanek Motorsport, driven by Jakub Knoll and Josef Zaruba, now under attack from IT's Racing, as the Porsche looks to be ready to make a move. Of course, it's going to be quite tough for them, as the Lamborghini is historically a very good car on the straights compared to the Porsche, who is usually much better through the corners. Of course, two cars with a very different philosophy, as both of them are used in their respective championship, Lamborghini having Super Trofeo series all over the world, not just Europe. And the same goes for Porsche, having the Porsche Super Cup, of course, as well as the various national championships that have taken the world by storm, with a car that is loved by drivers and teams alike. It is easy to set up, easy to race with, and to own, though it's quite a tough car to handle for drivers, especially at the top end, quality-wise, as we now see the Lamborghini going downhill towards turn number 13. Meanwhile, up front, ARC Bratislava in the LMP3 car is still in the lead. It's a good gap between the two Racing Trevor cars as well. It has to be said that these are two different specs of BMW GT3s. The first one, the M4 Evo, and the second one, the M6, the older version of the project for GT Racing from the manufacturer from Munich, back on board with Karin Racing and the car number 26. Karin Racing then is now onto the back of the Porsche Cup car of Additis Racing. As you can see now, all three cars separated by basically less than a second, coming through towards turn number 3. As here instead we see the race leader, car number 44, the LMP3 of ARC Bratislava, Meanwhile, we're seeing the sky getting darker and darker out there. We talked about this while on the starting grid. We could see some dark clouds coming into the picture, but now the track is becoming darker and darker as we speak, and it's not the sunset coming in, as we're gonna have to wait for that for at least another 4 hours. And we can see how dark it's getting from the Canyon Racing onboard right now. Meanwhile, in front, the Goodspeed Racing Team Mercedes has been knocking on the door of the overall podium. The Racing Trevo M6, driven by Gregor Žigo, Denis Vazek and Jess Krohn, under attack from Piotr Vira and the Goodspeed Racing Team. And behind them as well, the Arc Bratislava Lamborghini, getting ready to pick up some points, some very valuable points in their home race as well. The Konopka family, of course, racing with Arc Bratislava now for a very long time. It's a partnership that has brought immense results to both parties, and that is continuing season after season. Here we have the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing, car number 26, shared by Viktor Mraz and Maciej Homola. Jarosław Honzik was driving this car 3 weeks ago at the Red Bull Ring, now substituted by Maciej Homola, one of the most important drivers and most competitive drivers in the entire nation for Slovakia. Of course, a former TCR Eastern Europe champion and one of the most competitive TCR drivers in the last couple of seasons. For 2025, Maciej Homola, of course, is right here racing for a team as competitive as Karin Racing with the KTM Crossbow, though he has graduated to the GT2 European Championship with RTR projects, driving this exact car, the KTM Crossbow, as he was able to claim a podium finish so far this season, sitting in 5th in the championship. He was a back-to-back TCR Eastern Europe champion between 2023 and 2024, claiming a total of 7 victories across the 24 races that he had partook in. As meanwhile, we see the GT3 car, the M4 Evo of Racing Trevo, going wide into one of the opening corners. I think that's turn number 2 for car number 500, who looks to have made a mistake in turn number 1, which made them lose quite a lot of time. Now they're back on the front foot, back pushing, but it looks quite difficult for them in this stage. And here is a replay from the Karin Racing KTM Crossbow. As you can see how much speed is carried. We're at 200 kilometers an hour throughout turn number 2 before going uphill towards turn number 3. And this is the replay of the mistake made by Racing Trevo. Anton Žigo and Max Hesse behind the wheel of this car. They still are the GT3 leaders. Here we are back live with Karin Racing on board with car number 26. Here we are with the LMP3 Arc Bratislava piece of machinery, the bright yellow livery that has made Arc Bratislava famous all over Europe. Not just that, even in the entire world, as they partook in series as important as the Asian Le Mans Series and the European Le Mans Series with LMP3 and LMP2 machinery. A slight lockup as well for the driver, who was right now in first place with a 30-second gap over Racing Trevo, a gap that is only bound to extend, especially given the mistake made by the BMW some seconds ago. As here we can see how dark it's getting out there. And let's not forget that in 10 minutes or so, we're going to open the mandatory pit stop window that is going to see all cars having to pit once more this season, and for the first time today, of course. After the first hour of racing, it will be everyone by themselves. Strategy-wise, everything is going to be open, from tire changes to driver changes to state duration, refueling. Everything will be possible after the 1 hour mark, though in the first hour of racing, only a change of driver is possible during the mandatory pit stop window. As now we see the fight that has been going on virtually, actually, because we still haven't seen on-track action between these three, but these three cars have been as close as ever throughout the opening 80 minutes of racing. And here we see the Praga R1 Turbo. Of course, it's a very important car, the Praga R1, made entirely of carbon fiber, and a car that has been used to its full extent in championships all over Europe, such as the Brit Car Championship in the UK, where it is the reigning class that fights for the title. It's a very nimble car. It's a hybrid in between a prototype and a GT3 car, which of course has a lot more downforce than a regular GT3 car, but less power down the straights, which makes it quite competitive. Whereas here we can see one of the GT4 cars. That was the Mercedes of Lemma Racing, driven by Ivan Kian-Potesh, Matthias Lodi, and Miha Primozic this weekend. They are so far in the lead of the GT4 standings, ahead of Yannick Motorsport and car number 73. With the other GT4, sorry, that is the Aston Martin Vantage AMR GT4. Of course, GT4 racing becoming very important in the last few years. It is a very popular car. It's much easier to drive and, of course, much cheaper to own compared to a GT3 car. And that is why it has become a fairly standard car to own and drive and race with in Europe and in the entire world. First 20 minutes have almost gone by, with the Ligier LMP3 of ARC Bratislava still in the lead, as the Konopka father and son duo together with Zdeno Mikulashko are behind the wheel of this car, as well as the ARC Bratislava sister Lamborghini Huracan, who so far is hanging on in 4th position. Meanwhile, there's also the Aston Martin AMR GT4 that we talked about before, driven and prepared by Yannick Motorsport and their drivers, Václav Yannick and Peter Kukola. As we now see the AMR GT4 crossing the start-finish line. It's very interesting to see the differences in lap times between the different cars, and of course in between classes. We talked about the GT4 standings with 3 effective cars in there, 2 Mercedes AMG GT4s, the number 4, the number 444, and of course number 73 that we're watching right now. This one is among the quickest, a 2 minute 15.3 for the Aston Martin compared to a 2:15 flat for the other GT4 car, the gap of 3.6 seconds in between. And naturally now the lapping section of the race is about to start, as ARC Bratislava with the Ligier LMP3 is approaching one of the Porsche Cup cars. That is the DCR car of Dan Skalicki, Robert, and of course the number 992 getting ready to be lapped, and that was the case, as well as the Renault Clio by Lemma Racing, a team that is here with 4 cars, a Renault Clio, and then of course in the GT4 standings with Mercedes AMG GT4. Here we see ARC Bratislava again with the LMP3 going uphill and then downhill once again. That was the elevation change that brings drivers towards turn number 2, whereas the Praga R1 right now is at the final corner of the racetrack, now going towards the left, going over the airfield and then towards the start-finish straight. Here we have the 3 cars that have been battling so far for what is effectively 6th position in the overall standings. The Lamborghini Super Trofeo being also part of the GT Cup class, together with the Porsche, who's now trying maybe to make a move up the inside of turn number 10, though there was no space, but watch out for what could happen towards turn number 13. The Lamborghini now working tirelessly to try and keep the Porsche behind them, as well as the Canon Racing KTM Crossbow. These 3 cars racing with a very similar pace so far throughout this event. As we now approach the pit stop window, which is about to open in 1 minute and 30 seconds. It's going to be quite important to understand how to tackle the strategy. Of course, the format follows for the first hour the natural FIA CEZ championship rules, but more on that later, because now Additives Racing seems to be quite close to the back of the Lamborghini. Here is the part near the pit boxes with some Additives Racing members saying hi to the camera and of course cheering on their drivers as the Porsche has got past the Lamborghini Super Trofeo behind them. And now we are on board with the Canon Racing car. Just look how grey the sky has turned. The one on the windshield, it's not rain, it's dirt probably, but it's not looking too good for the weather out here today so far. As now the Canon Racing KTM also makes a move up the inside of the Lamborghini, as Jakub Knoll loses some spot and drops down to 8th position from 6th on the grid. You can see how the wind is also picking up, which may be a sign of things to come should the rain start coming. And it feels like it has, as the Porsche almost goes wide into turn number 12. As we now go towards the final 2 corners, it looks like the rain is very imminent, and look at how windy it has become out there. As now the LMP3 of ARC Bratislava is lapping one of the 3 cars that we've watched so far battle for P6, and that was the Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo of Mechanic Motorsport. As here in the pit boxes, things are ready to have some drivers start the pit maneuvers, and that is the aforementioned Lamborghini of Mechanic Motorsport pitting. That is the first car that is into the pits for the mandatory pit stop today. It has to be said that the wind has really picked up as of right now, which is of course an added difficulty for the drivers to handle as the cars get snappier and more difficult to control. And that is why you can see on the onboard of the Canon Racing KTM how careful you have to be on throttle, especially in traction zones, as the wind has really picked up by now, as the Lamborghini is still in the pits. We also see other cars who are getting ready to make their pit stops. So far so good for ARC Bratislava, and I have to say it's getting really windy now. You can also feel that from the track itself. As you can see how things are going, this could potentially mean that somewhat of a storm may be cooking up here at the Slovakia Ring. We can see it right now with the sky getting very grey at the moment for this racetrack. There's no rain falling, but that may just be a sign of things to come, as it's getting very dark outside and the wind has picked up in intensity. You can see also by the pollen falling around and flying around here at the penultimate corner of the racetrack, which is where the wind is the most powerful, as the KTM crossbow now pulls into the pit lane. As car number 26 engages the pit limiter, and they're now getting ready for their first pit stop of the day. We also see one of the Lamborghini, that was the ARC Bratislava car, in the pit lane, as the KTM crossbow now becomes the very complicated driver change procedures. Of course, in this car it has this very peculiar way of getting in and out of it, which means that you have to disengage the wheel first, then opening up the hatch and let the driver climb out of the car from the top of it, instead of a regular side door in many GT cars, such as the Lamborghini Huracan of ARC Bratislava. We're seeing 2 pit stops happen at the same time, as there's of course a minimum time to be respected for the pit lane, as it was a very quick pit stop for Karen Racing, though that was only because of the fact that the KTM team is using their refueling system at the refueling area and not within their own team, which is why they had to stop again. That was to put fuel in the car, whereas the Lamborghini Huracan has already left the pit lane once more. Here you can see the ARC Bratislava Ligier LMP3 still leading things, going strong after the first 30 minutes of racing. We have 5 more of those now, with 2.5 hours coming up. And here you can see the Porsche 911 of Team DCR 992 car now being serviced in the pit lane, cleaning the windshield, as well as getting ready to resume racing once more. Meanwhile, the Karen Racing KTM is also stopped at the pit lane at the end of it to refuel. So now you can see just how much wind there is in the last part of the track, which is where it is the most powerful, blowing from right to left on the screen. As here you can see Peter Kukola's car, the Aston Martin AMR GT4, getting serviced for the first time today. Yannick Motorsport using this car this season, a team that of course needs no introduction in Eastern Europe racing. It has been on top in every category, from TCR Eastern Europe to less competitive touring car series such as the Clio Cup and the Twingo Cup, and then of course in single-seater championships such as Formula 4, CEZ, and so on. As now we see the ARC Bratislava LMP3 racing on, coming towards the final corner. It's going to be quite interesting to see what happens should the rain come sooner rather than later. The weather forecast is still in 2 minds, As now, though, you can see that some rain seems to be falling, especially in the third sector. We called it. We knew it was going to happen eventually. Right now, we're on board with the Karin racing car on the other side of the track. This is turn 3. You can see how tricky the conditions are starting to be. You can see some drops of rain. Yes, you can definitely see the rain now falling out of the sky towards turn number 4. And this will make things hugely interesting in this race, because many drivers will have to see how to tackle this, whether to put rain tires on or to just crack on with slicks. As now you can see the race leader, the Ligier LMP3 car of ARC Bratislava, starting a tire change. They're putting other slick tires on. That's because the rain is very light at the moment, and just in a few parts of the racetrack. Wind right now is the most difficult thing, though you cannot take that into account with a pit stop. We also saw one of the Lemma Racing Mercedes getting ready for a pit stop, as here the KTM Crossbow is fighting with the Goodspeed Racing Team Mercedes. Car number 14 so far in third place. They still haven't stopped. And it is exactly what it is doing right now, that Mercedes, the AMG GT3 Evo. Whereas the Karin Racing KTM has already made its mandatory pit stop for the first hour and has therefore decided to crack on for some more laps, at least for another 26 minutes for sure. As now the LMP3 is getting on the racetrack once more. They had a very good advantage over the other cars. And here it is, the Goodspeed Mercedes starting their pit stop procedures. Car number 14 being, of course, serviced by its team. They are trying to get the pit stop out of the way as quickly as possible, checking the pressure on the tires. Of course, it's quite an important thing to get on top of, given that it is quite difficult for the cars to keep the tires in their natural and correctly working temperature window when the weather is this unstable. Also because it's still very hot here at the Slovakia Ring. We've reached 30 degrees for the air temperature. Track almost getting up to 40 degrees throughout the day. Though of course with this wind things have changed quite a bit, and there's still a few spots of rain here and there, making life difficult for the drivers. We're also seeing one of the Porsche Cup cars, the DCR 992 car precisely, and now the Karin Racing KTM Crossbow. Mercedes is now ready to finish their pit stop procedures. The first of what could be many today, as the new 3-hour format gives plenty of room for improvements throughout the race, as well as plenty of occasions to bounce back after some issues throughout it. Let's not forget, there's also 3 times the amount of points available for this race, as 75 points will be awarded to the winner of each class, thus making this race hugely important for the championship. Here we can see the BMW M6 of Racing Trevor, one of the old school GT3 cars as of right now, of what is in fact an outdated model for the Munich-based manufacturer. Of course, the GT3 car, sorry, of choice now for BMW is the M4 with the Evo model, but now you can see the M6 having to defend from Karin Racing's KTM Crossbow. It's 2 very different concepts of cars, put one against the other. It is the beauty of the FIA CEZ Endurance Series. Carrying Racing now inches closer to another position, and just in front we have the other BMW, the one of Racing Trevor, but the M4 GT3 Evo, who seems to be struggling a bit now, as they are still in second position, but they are now just in front of their sister team, and it looked like it was trying to let the M6 through into turn 10, as now we are with the Porsche from DCR. And here with the Lamborghini of ARC Bratislava going up the hill, followed by the other Slovakian car, the Slovakian team of course, and that is the Ligier LMP3. But yes, we've seen the BMW M4 GT3 Evo of Racing Trevor being overtaken by the sister M6 car, and of course the Carrying Racing KTM Crossbow, which makes it a change of leadership for at least the GT3 class, which now sees the Goodspeed Mercedes car number 14 in first place and second overall behind the LMP3 of ARC Bratislava, and then it's Racing Trevor with their second car, the M6, just in front of the M4. The Carrying Racing KTM Crossbow, however, is lapped and down so far in 9th place, with now Victor Mraz and Macho Homola trying to make up some lost ground on the DCR Porsche that we saw before, the gap now being 20 seconds. KTM constantly gaining over their rivals. This is meanwhile the BMW M4 of Racing Trevor, now under attack from ARC Bratislava. This is 4th position, and the Lamborghini goes through. Looks to be not an easy task for Antal Gigo and Max Hesse so far this race, but we're back on board with Carrying Racing. Back live with the images on the Ligier LMP3 of ARC Bratislava. Of course, the car that is actively dominating this race, as we could expect, especially given the fact that it is the only prototype present here together, if you want, with the Praga R1 Turbo. But of course, that is two very different cars that lap on a very different pace. Now you can see that the sun has started to come out of its shell a bit, so maybe rain is out of the question for now, though the sky is still pretty grey, as you can see now with the KTM Crossbow of Carrying Racing going through turn number 3, where it was raining a couple of laps ago, as well as here on turn 13, and we are with Additis Racing and their Porsche 991 Cup car, driven this weekend by Radim Adamek and David Chivok. The latter also racing for Clio Cup this weekend, so a double race weekend for him. He's not the only one. Mia Primozic as well is racing with Lemma Racing and Mercedes in the GT4 standings. And speaking of GT4, this is the Aston Martin Vantage of Vaclav Janik and Petr Kukola, the number 73, so far in second position in the GT4 standings, as the Lemma Racing car number 4 is in the lead, but it's still running in a very good position so far in this race. Meanwhile, the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 of ARC Bratislava is still in the running, so far in 4th position, 6 seconds away from the Racing Trevor car that's currently holding down 3rd place. That is car number 220 of Gregor Žigo, Denis Vajek and Jess Kron. Meanwhile, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo still holding on to their position. It's a very well-rounded car, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, being used in many different championships, but back on board with the current racing KTM. Here we go with the Good Speed Racing Mercedes, who has taken everyone by surprise and is now into 2nd position in the overall standings, most importantly in the lead of the GT3 class. With now less than 45 minutes gone by. Meanwhile, the two Racing Trevor cars are back together once more, though separated by almost a lap now, as Antal Žigo and Gregor Žigo are in the 2 different cars, the latter in the BMW M6, which is behind on track but ahead in the standings, and Antal in the white M4 GT3 Evo, as now the Praga R1 Turbo gets out of the way for the leader with the LMP3 of ARC Bratislava. Praga now going through the final couple of corners, as is the current racing KTM Crossbow. You can see the LMP3 hot on their tail to lap the car that is currently in 8th position. That is going to happen into turn 1 as ARC Bratislava up a place on track, of course, because of the standings they are still in the lead and have been in such position ever since the race started. We have seen the opening 44 minutes of racing so far. There's still 2 hours and 50 minutes to go though, so we're only a quarter of the way through this amazing spectacle that is the FIA CEZ endurance race. 3 hours of tireless racing here at the Slovakia Ring, one of the most anticipated events of the entire season, breaking new ground for the championship with a special endurance event that features an extended 3-hour endurance race, while also of course incorporating the standard 1-hour race that we are seeing as of right now. Such race will end at the end of the 1st hour, so in a little bit under 15 minutes, and from there it's going to be anyone's game strategy wise. We're going to see many different cars tackle the pit lane in different moments, as tire changes, driver swaps, refueling, it's all going to be up to the drivers and the teams without following a set schedule like we did in this opening stint of the race, in this opening hour, which is of course part of the FIA CEZ 1-hour classification. In order to let this race happen, of course, the weekend structure was changed, with Thursday being designated as a test day, of course giving everyone valuable time to race and familiarize themselves with the track and the setups before actual free practice happened yesterday on Friday. And actually each team has its own strategy planned. Of course, depending on how many drivers we have in a single team, teams could decide to let them race for one or multiple stints, changing tires maybe just when changing drivers, or opting to have fresh tires at every stint should they have enough tires to do so. And now we're very close to the transition to the endurance format, meaning that the pit stop strategy will be opened for all teams. And of course, this brings us to talk about refueling as well, as of course this will be a very, very hot topic for a race like this one. Refueling can be done in two different ways. First of all, at the refueling zone at the end of the pit lane, where manual methods can be applied, or directly in front of the team's garages using ATL style towers, just like we see in other categories as well, like the 24-hour series by Preventic. Here we can see the KTM crossbow once more into the pit lane. And that is Karin Racing with the number 26 back in the pits, performing what is currently their second pit stop of the race. As we also have Aditis Racing keep on going with the Porsche 991 Cup car. Behind them it's Aston Martin for Yannick Motorsport as they now go towards turn number 1, and then there's the Clio Cup car that's still racing so far, now lapped by the Mercedes of Good Speed Racing, which has been overtaken by ARC Bratislava, who are now in second position. The Lamborghini making it a 1-2 for the Slovakian racing team, though the race is still very long, with 2 hours and 11 minutes left on the clock. So far though, it's been smooth sailing for ARC Bratislava, as the team has performed flawlessly with both cars, the LMP3 in the lead, and now the Lamborghini Huracan at the top of the GT3 standings as well. Of course, the FIA CZ endurance race has many different categories, one for each vehicle type present here. The D5 class is the prototype class that sees the Ligier LMP3 and the Praga R1 Turbo being part of it. We also have GT4 cars, such as this one, the Lemma Racing Mercedes. There are two cars of Lemma in this category, the number 4 and the number 444, as both cars have been racing so far, and the number 4 is actually in the lead of the GT4 standings. We also have the Cup standings, the GTC and GTC1. These are for those cars that are Cup cars and reserved to those types of vehicles. The GTC is open to all Cup cars, such as the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, most notably car number 22, whereas the GTC1 is only reserved to Porsches, while unfortunately we see the KTM Crossbow, which is part of the GTX class of Mraz and Homola, having to retire from the race, or if not retire, going into the box to try and fix what seems to be an ongoing issue as of right now, with the driver having to step away from the car. It's never a good sign, that, is it? Being pulled into the garage and leaving your car for your mechanics to try and work on it. This unfortunately is a sign of very, very difficult times ahead. Meanwhile, Racing Trevor tries to keep on going. So far in 4th position, roughly 30 seconds away from the lead of the GT3 standings, held by ARC Bratislava. Good Speed Racing as well has done a phenomenal job so far. They sit in 3rd, just 7 seconds behind ARC, though they have been losing quite some time in the last couple of laps. If we have a look at how the different teams have gotten on in the last couple of minutes, and most importantly on the previous lap, the Lamborghini has been lapping 3.2 seconds faster than the Mercedes. A 201.6 for Konopka at the wheel of the ARC Bratislava car, and a 204.8 for Piotr Vira. The ARC Bratislava Lamborghini being part of the GTX class due to some modifications to the car, whereas the Mercedes is in line with the GT3 regulations, and so it is in the GT3 class together with the two Racing Trevor cars, number 220, the BMW M6, and number 500 with the car being on a track as the BMW M4 GT3 Evo. Here we are, meanwhile, with the Aston Martin AM4. And then switching on to the Lamborghini Super Trofeo and the camera that watches on at the penultimate corner of the track. The Praga R1 Turbo right now being the car that is been getting out of the penultimate corner of the racetrack. And now up towards the start-finish line. The Praga R1 driven by JMT Racing Team and Roman Rubicek at the wheel. Currently in 11th position, just behind now the BMW M4 GT3 Evo, which has struggled, it has to be said, throughout this race, especially in the last 20 minutes or so, as it has dropped to 8th position, lapping in the 2-minute 10s, which is definitely not the 1-minute 57.4 that they were able to clock in qualifying. So that is definitely some sort of issue for that car. Whereas so far we have the Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo of Mechanic Motorsport doing a great job. And here we are with ARC Bratislava in 2nd position in the overall standings, and with the sole Clio Cup present, driven by Niko Pulic, Andrei Makarovic, and Istok Armic, with the Mercedes AMG GT4 and the car with the number 444, whereas the Renault Clio has Dusko Banyaglav and Hrvoje Belinic behind its wheel. Back with the LMP3 of ARC Bratislava. With the Mercedes of Lemma Racing still holding on to the lead of the GT4 standings. The number 4 car of Ivan Kiampotes, Italian Mattias Lodi, and Slovenian Miha Primozic, who has also raced in the Clio Cup race earlier. And speaking of Clio Cup, here is car number 23, of course, leader in its only class, TCC, for TCR inspired cars. But here we see the Praga R1 Turbo, 2nd place in the D5 standings. That is naturally the place for such a car that is so incredibly competitive around this racetrack. And not just that, though it has to be said that it could suffer a bit from the long straights of the Slovakia Ring, but the team has done a terrific job to prepare such car in the most minuscule of details ahead of this race weekend. And the same can be said for Additis Racing and their Porsche Cup car, which is now trying to lead its category, and it's doing so beautifully with a good 10-second gap over the nearest rivals, being the other Porsche Cup present, the DCR number 992 currently in second position in the GTC1 standings, of course only reserved to Porsche Cup cars, and in 7th position in the overall standings. Back with Racing Trevor, we haven't seen them in a while, and that continues to be the case as we only got a glimpse of them, but the BMW M6 is working tirelessly to try and bridge that gap in the GT3 standings, now second place in their category, 47 seconds off their leaders, and that is Piotr Vira in the Goodspeed Racing Team Mercedes, who has been lapping 1.5 seconds faster than the M6. Naturally, of course, the Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo is a car with a much more powerful package overall compared to the M6, which is of course an older car that has not been around for a couple of years now, ever since the M4 has been released by the Munich-based manufacturer. Of course, that is a difference that needs to be analyzed thoroughly, as the two cars present different types of peculiarities, meaning that the M6 is a much heavier car that is faster on the straights, whereas the M4 is much more nimble to drive and much more balanced, which is why, of course, it's an evolution of the M6 project, able to reduce. Of course, the weight of the car was a big ask for BMW, a manufacturer that is known for quite heavy cars as well. If we think about the GTE era that used to run at Le Mans until a couple of seasons ago, the wonderfully powerful yet heavy BMW M8, and of course the M4 being a much more nimble car to drive, as we see now the Praga R1 Turbo trying to make some inroads, especially compared to the top 10 in the overall standings. They sit around 40 seconds away from it, though the GT4 car of Yannick and Kukola is lapping slower than them so far. Whereas here we are with the ARC Bratislava Lamborghini Huracan, a car that has been modified, so it's not in the GT3 standings anymore. Instead, they are racing in the GTX class for all those cars who did not fit with the GT3 regulations. Meanwhile, we see Mercedes with their GT4 car, and Lema Racing more specifically, tackle the middle part of the circuit. This is race leaders of ARC Bratislava in the Ligier LMP3. And right about now, the first hour has gone by. We are now into our second third of the race. ARC Bratislava being the leaders and therefore about to be the winners of the FIA CEZ 1 hour race, which is incorporated in this bigger 3-hour race. And as of right now, we are entering uncharted territory for the FIA CEZ Endurance Series. For the first time, we're going longer than an hour and going up to 3 hours to include more spectacle, more racing, more overtakes, and more drama on a racetrack that saw the rain briefly appear for just a couple of laps. Now the sun is back out. Maybe it's going to be quite a big ask for the weather to have some rain once more. Probably that is not going to happen, though on Sunday it is forecasted throughout the day with some sprinkles here and there in the morning and in the afternoon as well. And of course we're going to bring you other racing with the Clio Cup and the Twingo Cup ready to go on Sunday, with race 2 for each series as well. Though this weekend still has more to come. Generally, there is of course the main event, the FIA European Truck Racing Championship, as well as a TCR European Endurance. Both races both championships will go on tomorrow as well, with stage 2 of TCR European Endurance, which rounds out their race, as well as, of course, the final 2 races of the FIA ETRC. Meanwhile, we see maybe some issues with one of the cars, and that is the Aston Martin GT4. It has lost a bit of pace, as well as the Porsche of Additis Racing, it seems to be, as Adamek and Givok had their gap to the other GTC1 car of DCR cut to only 1.7 seconds. So we'll see next time by on the start finish line if that changes. That is the fight for 6th position. Meanwhile, ARC Bratislava seems to have everything under control in both the D5 and the GTX classes, as well as the overall standings, where they are currently in a 1-2 position. Speaking of the prototype class, the D5, we see the Praga R1 Turbo. Naturally, of course, we are now witnessing the second third of the race with the Aston Martin AM4 racing on as they are trying their best to make up some ground over their GT4 rivals. Meanwhile, Lemma Racing is still holding on to the lead. Here with Goodspeed Racing Team and Mercedes, who are overall fighting for a spot on the overall podium, and so far actually they're leading the GT3 standings as well, which is a great effort for Goodspeed Racing Team and Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo, driven by Piotr Vira, who's on his own for this 3-hour race, which can make things very interesting come the second half of it. Naturally, of course, now we're entering a very, very difficult part of the race. Speaking of Goodspeed Racing Team, of course, they have been racing for the past 6 years after being created in 2020. The Polish outfit from Poznan, with Piotr Bednarek as the team principal. They have been racing in some very important championships such as the Winter Series GT in 2024 and the International GT Open as well throughout the years. Here we can see the ARC Bratislava LMP3 on the other hand. Racing on. And here is the car that is now leading the GTC1 standings. We talked about this, especially a couple of minutes ago, with one of the cars having a bit of trouble, and that was the Additis Racing Porsche Cup car. And so DCR is now in the lead of the GTC1 standings with Dan Skalicki, Robert ML and Robert ST, with the 3 drivers lineup being quite popular this weekend. Of course, with a 3-hour race, it's quite difficult to tackle that, especially with so many experience with only 2 drivers, or perhaps even solo. That is a very tough feat to accomplish. Piotr Vira being the only one, together with the Praga R1 Turbo of Roman Rubicek, to be on their own in the entry list. Meanwhile, we see the ARC Bratislava LMP3 car racing on as they keep the lead so far. Now once again going through to the final corner to finish lap number 32 and then begin lap number 33. Meanwhile, Lemma Racing is also going strong as they are still in the lead of the GT4 standings with car number 4, which we are seeing right about now. This is the sister car of Lemma Racing with Niko Pulic, Andrej Makarovic and Istok Ramic that are right now in the top 10 and third in the GT4 standings behind the top 2. And separating the two Lemma Racing cars is the Aston Martin AMR GT4 of Yannick Motorsport. Of course, GT4 Racing is a new frontier of Gran Turismo cars that have been gaining a lot of importance and recognition throughout the motorsport scene, especially around Europe, as the European GT4 Championship is one of the most populated ones in the world right about now. And it is a car that has been quite popular in the past few years, hasn't it? It's a car that is quite easy to drive and to maintain throughout the whole season. It is quite nimble, not too big and not too costly as well, mistakes wise. And of course it's quite cheap to race with it. And it is a sturdy piece of machinery, given that GT4 Racing always has some very heated on-track battles, especially in European Championships that are going strong right now in the old continent. Meanwhile, ARC Bratislava still in the lead. The Ligier LMP3 car holding P1 so far. It's been a flawless performance for them as of right now. It has to be said, they are looking very strong indeed in this race weekend. Naturally, of course, they have the fastest car out there, which means that they are for sure one of the best teams and one of the best lineups as well. Meanwhile, the track seems to be completely dry as of right now, and it has been for quite some laps now. The clouds seem to have left the Slovakia Ring, and rain does not seem to be on the horizon so far. We briefly saw car number 23 as well. The Seoul Clio Cup, and it has to be said, fair play to Lemma Racing for bringing a Renault Clio, the only car in the TCC standings, but going strong as of right now with Duško Banjaglav and Hrvoje Velinic, the two drivers sharing the wheel of its car. Meanwhile, so far it's been smooth sailing for ARC Bratislava, no issues whatsoever in the opening 70 minutes of racing. We also see the situation in the GTC 1 standings as well. The Cup cars reserved to Porsche in the GTC 1 standings, whereas GTC is open to any Cup car like the Ferrari Challenge or the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, the latter being the only one represented here at the Slovakia Ring by Mikelek Motorsport, who are currently in 6th position in the overall standings, whereas the GTC 1 standings sees the DCR car in 4th position overall and going on strong with a phenomenal performance. I think this is a great time to have a little recap of the positions so far. The ARC Bratislava Ligier LMP3 is still in the lead, the D5 class going on strong, of course the prototype being the quickest car of the field so far. Here it is, with Miro Konopka, Aran Konopka and Zdeno Mikuláško in the entry list for both ARC Bratislava cars, who are right now in a 1-2 as the Lamborghini Huracan GTX is in 2nd position. Third place belongs to car number 220. Here it is, the BMW M6 of Racing Trevor, with Gregor Žigo, Denis Vajek and Jesse Kron. Fourth place so far for the GTC1 car of DCR, with car number 992 in fourth place and leader of the GTC1 standings. The GT3 category then sees other two cars with, naturally, first off, the good speed racing team, with the Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo. The blue and purple livery of Piotr Vira was currently in fifth, just ahead of the leaders of the GT4 class, with Lema Racing in the number 4 car with Ivan Kiampotec, Matthias Lodi and Miha Primožić. ARC Bratislava then in the lead of the race so far. And for the LMP3 car, this is of course a chance to shine, as this iteration of LMP3 cars, meanwhile there's some gravel being kicked up at the penultimate corner, so we've had someone go slightly wide, and one of them could be car number 220, who was near the crime scene, as we saw. But speaking of the LMP3 car for ARC Bratislava, of course, this is one of the few championships where the old spec LMP3 car can still run. In fact, since this 2025 season, we've had an update to the LMP3 cars, who are now running a Toyota engine and have received a new aerodynamic and safety package as a result, with the third generation of LMP3 cars racing from this season on until 2029. Of course, the one of ARC Bratislava is the same car that we've seen in the previous seasons, and so this is still the second generation LMP3 car, which is still very, very quick and very competitive, though of course compared to the new one it should be a bit slower. However, though, that isn't the case here in the FIA CEZ Endurance Championship, as it is the only LMP3 class and only LMP3 entry for not just this race weekend, but for the first 2 weekends so far, also counting the race at the Red Bull Ring that we saw on May 18th. We're now with Lema Racing and one of their GT4 cars. And now, of course, with the GTX Lamborghini Huracan number 7 of ARC Bratislava. Right now it is a very, very difficult part of the race for all teams involved. They need to be quite sure of what they're doing, of the strategy, and most importantly, of their consistency on track. It is not the time to be relaxed. It's not the time to play any games. You have to start being as considerate as ever. Naturally, of course, this part of the race is very difficult, and a lovely split screen to see, unfortunately, two tails of the same race. On one hand, the Clio Cup going strong and pitting for the second time today. On the other hand, unfortunately, the onboard of a car that has struggled a lot today, and that is the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing. And unfortunately, that is not the way things wanted to go for that team. Naturally, being one of the fastest cars in the first half. Though now this is not the case anymore. And that is due to the fact that the car seems to have an oil pressure issue. Meanwhile, the BMW is still going strong. The M6 is currently in third position in the overall standings, but much more importantly, it is still in the lead of the GT3 class. Here is the ARC Bratislava car as well, trying to make some inroads. And naturally now we see how important this part of the race could actually be. The LMP3 ARC Bratislava car being as strong as ever, though in first position. Naturally continuing its own development of the race. It is now much easier for them, the job, as they have a very big gap over their rivals. Though it has to be said that in this type of racing, it is quite difficult for teams to maintain a correct mindset, if you want, as it is very easy for a team to struggle and to, you know, make it very tough for them to keep the attention up, if you want, as of course it is quite difficult to maintain such concentration levels throughout the entire race. Meanwhile, we have what it looks to be a very sunny sky, as naturally we see the fans still being in the stands. We saw a lot of people actually this weekend, as the FIA ETRC is a championship that attracts a lot of different people, as the grandstands were full of fans, and many of them sticking around for this race as well. And we're now reaching almost the halfway point of this historic 3-hour race. ARC Bratislava still in the lead. And you can see why with the number 44 car, the LMP3 livery, being the same as the GT3 one. And it's a color scheme that has accompanied ARC Bratislava throughout their entire racing career. Whereas here we see the DCR GT Cup car, Porsche Cup car, and of course the Clio, the number 23 car. Now the situation is quite interesting, as you can see, with one of the Porsche Cup cars nearing the back of one of the Lemma Racing Mercedes LMP GT4, sorry, with now the Porsche going around the outside to complete the lapping process. Car number 992 is currently in 4th position, whereas the GT4 is in 5th. Naturally though, running 2 different races at the same time. The last lap, the GT Cup car lapped with a 2:07.1, whereas the GT4s are lapping in a 2:14s, which is of course a natural delta for 2 different categories. Meanwhile, the D5 car of ARC Bratislava is absolutely flying. They had a fastest lap of a 1:55.9 throughout this race, which is 1/10 quicker than their pole lap time, which is absolutely phenomenal from the LMP3 machinery. Now lapping with a very comfortable 2-minute flat .9, Of course, there's no need to risk, no need to make any mistakes, and push as hard as they can, especially given that the advantage over the sister GTX car, which is now caught by the cameras, is very, very hefty. In fact, we have now started yet another lap with the LMP3 car in the lead, and it has 26 seconds over the sister GTX Lamborghini. Gap that has gone down in the previous laps, given the Ligier's much easier run of form in this second stint. The fastest time for both teams are separated by almost 4 seconds, which means that the car that is now chased by the cameras is very much taking it easy, not to make any mistakes that could jeopardize this result in front of the home crowd and home fans. Meanwhile, the GTC1 car of DCR still holding on to 4th overall and the lead of the standings. And crucially, the top 5 right now in the overall standings is made up of 5 different classes. We have the D5 prototypes in the lead, the GTX category in second with the Lamborghini Huracan of Arc Bratislava, the GT3 category with Racing Trevor and the BMW M6, the GTC1 class with the Porsche 991.2 Cup car of DCR, and last but not least the GT4 class with car number 4, the Mercedes AMG GT4 of Renault Racing. Here we see the Racing Trevor M6. It was a car that had a huge history in racing. Of course, racing in the most important championships, the GT3, such as the GT World Challenge, and in many other series as well. It's a car that was built and that debuted back in 2016 with a V8 cylinder engine of 585 horsepower with a top speed of 280 kilometers an hour, and it was the next iteration of GT cars for BMW after the Z4 went into retirement, basically after its introduction in 2010. Of course, being a large coupe car, it had to lose some weight, and of course the aerodynamic modification made it much more suitable for GT racing. It started off in January of 2016 with many victories between Europe and North America, but the car's biggest achievement was in 2020 when it came through to claim the win at the historic 24 hours of the Nürburgring with road racing with Nicky Katzberg, Nick Yellowly and Alexander Sims. It's a racetrack and race car that has won fans' hearts over its use in the 6 years that it was. And the same honestly can be said for the Lamborghini Huracan, with Lamborghini's new project actually coming next season in 2026, as the Italian brand is looking for a revamp of one of the most successful cars in GT3 history, and of course one of the most successful brands in motorsport industry and the car racing world altogether. We talked about Lamborghini having their own championships for the Super Trofeo cars, not just in Italy where they come from, but in Europe, Asia and North America as well. Speaking of Lamborghini, there it is, the car in the pits. The broadcasting team doing a great job to immediately go and chase that story, as the number 7 car now pits for new tires and some fuel. We talked about refueling before. This car and every single car in this championship can refuel either at their own pit box with ATL towers, just like that one that we see on the right hand side of the screen, or in the refueling zone at the end of the pit lane, like we saw from the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing earlier today. Unfortunately though, that race lasted only 20 laps, as they have now retired since almost 40 minutes after they had to give in for what looked like a fuel pressure issue. Here is car number 7, the second ARC Bratislava entry, the first one of course being the Ligier LMP3, who's topping the standings so far. A phenomenal pit stop that is now over and done with, and as the LMP3 roars on, the GT3 is ready to go back to the racetrack in what is a phenomenal performance so far for the home heroes of ARC Bratislava in this endurance race. Mercedes with the AMG GT4 car right now up into 5th position in the overall standings, as you can see. Now trying to fight as hard as they can for a spot in the top 5, but chased by their own other car. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost the Aston Martin of Yannick Motorsport as well. The number 73 AMR GT4 now stopped since lap number 28, whereas the race leaders for the GT4 class are on lap 35. It was a close fight between Mercedes and Aston Martin. Look at how hard the ARC Bratislava Lamborghini is pushing right onto the limit of the track on the green part of it, enjoying it as much as possible, especially in the first lap with new tires, which is usually what gives the best results. And naturally now for Lamborghini, the chance to gain some ground over the Ligier LMP3 in the lead, thanks to this quote-unquote undercut, which sees the drivers pit before to put new tires in and push as hard as they can on the outlap and the subsequent flying lap. So far so good though for the Ligier LMP3 in first. Seems to be no trouble for that, as ARC Bratislava is now in the first and second position, as we've seen in the last 50 minutes or so of this endurance race, and we are officially now in the second half of this 3-hour race. 1 hour 29 minutes and 48 seconds left on the clock for an event that is a milestone for the GT Cup Series and for FIA CEZ Endurance, as this event breaks new ground with a special 3-hour race that included, of course, the 1-hour classification at the start, and then now develops into a very orthodox endurance race. Here we see the DCR car in the GTC1 standings, the only one that has survived. Unfortunately, the other one slowed down after the first hour of racing, with Aditis not able to continue this endurance event, which is instead going the way of DCR. Car number 992 still fighting and holding on to not just the lead of the GTC1 class, but of the last place inside the top 4 in the overall standings, which is a very important result for them, as now the car gets checked by the team, trying to figure out where everything is, if everything is under control. The pit stop phase is still going on strong, as of course the Porsche has the last few checks to complete before heading back out on the racetrack. A change of drivers as well. The 992 car has 3 different drivers in the entry list, and so everyone will have to drive at some point, with the pit stop now being over and done with, and car number 992 able to rejoin the fast lane as of right now. Meanwhile, the Racing Trevor car still going strong. And the GT4 car of Lemma Racing as well, currently in what is actually fifth position in the overall standings. As you can see, car number 4 is now in 5th, and the 444 car, the other Lemma Racing sister GT4 car, is in 6th for a Lemma Racing 1-2 in the category. Unfortunately, we've lost some minutes ago the Aston Martin AMR GT4 car, which is of course a real shame given how quick it was in the first half of the opening stint, and in the first hour as well, actually, given the competitiveness of the Aston Martin. A battle, the one between Mercedes and Aston Martin, which is set to go on this season, with the FIA CEC Endurance calendar continuing on after the first 2 rounds. We've been to the Red Bull Ring in the middle of May, we're here at the Slovakia Ring now at the start of June, and then in the first real weekend of summer we'll be going to Poznan, Poland, the home of Good Speed Racing team, with Piotr Vira. Unfortunate car that has stopped racing today after quite some laps. It is now in 7th overall, but is unfortunately not in the running for an overall podium anymore, though it was in 2nd position at one point. But their home race is coming up pretty shortly, from the 27th to the 29th of June in Poznan. The following month we'll see Autodrom Most make its way to the calendar from the 25th to the 27th of July for round number 4. The Slovakia Ring will once again feature for round 5 on August 24th, before the 2 final races of the season. From the 5th to the 7th of September we'll be heading to the Czech Republic at the Brno circuit, whereas Hungary will host the season finale at the brand new Balaton Park circuit, which opened last year to track racing after breaking ground in 2023. Meanwhile, ARC Bratislava racing on, as the Lamborghini GTX car is now crossing the start-finish line once more, starting what is lap number 45 for them. Meanwhile, the LMP3 car is 1 lap ahead, but it has to be said that Lamborghini has made 1 more pit stop compared to the DJ LMP3, and it's started to catch their sister car thanks to the new tires. I mean, different fuel loads as well. Meanwhile, BMW and Mercedes taking care of lapping duties, as we saw the M6 going through on one of the AMG GT4s. Still going strong is the Renault Clio as well. They have been going strong since the very beginning with Lemma Racing, as Dusko Banyaglov and Hrvoje Belinic are still in the running, currently in 9th position. Now up to 7th following the retirements and the stoppages of both Piotr Vira and the 22 GTC car, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, who's not racing anymore after the first hour. Therefore now it's Renault Clio in 7th position. Meanwhile, BMW with Racing Trevor still going strong, unfortunately for them. The other car number 500, stopped after 25 laps. Some sort of issue with the BMW M4 GT3 Evo that we saw earlier throughout this race, being in 2nd position and leaders of the GT3 standings, though unfortunately it is not the case anymore. But the sister car of Racing Trevor, the M6, is currently still leading the GT3 standings and in 3rd place in the overall classifications. Here is the Renault Clio of Lemma Racing as well. Still going strong, still trying their best as they look to conquer the challenge of the 3 hours of racing. And here you can see the sun finally coming around as the Mercedes hits with car number 4, the leader of the GT4 standings. It's been so far a great race for Lemma, and they have done a phenomenal job, it has to be said, so far. Not just with this car, but with the other 2 that they have brought for this 3-hour race. Currently in 5th, 6th and 7th in the overall standings, though it has to be said that they are racing in the 2 slowest categories car-wise, GT4 and the TCC as well. As we now see the pit stop procedures still going on down at Lemma Racing. Of course, there's also minimum time for the pits, as now we have the GTC car of DCR, the number 992, going for a trip into the gravel, and that is turn number 1, one of the trickiest points of the entire racetrack. It's been a slight off for the Porsche. Meanwhile, Mercedes is back on track with the number 4, as it now goes out once again, whereas here's the replay of DCR going wide on their own, though still retaining the lead of the GTC1 standings and retaining 4th position overall. Lemma Racing, meanwhile, has gone back out on track, and this is the other car, the 444, who is now stopping for a full service, I presume, given what happened with the sister car, the number 4, which was just in the pit lane seconds ago. So a cut copy strategy. Carbon copy of what we saw with the number 4. Here it is, the Lemma Racing crew once more changing the tires on the right hand side of the car. There's also a change of drivers going on. The 444 shared by Niko Pulic, Andrej Makarovic and Istok Armic. The first one, Pulic being from Croatia, whereas Makarovic and Armic are from Slovenia. There's all sorts of procedures going on during the pit stop. Of course, cleaning the windshield is one of these. Very important procedures. Changing tires, of course, refueling, and naturally changing drivers sometimes. Which is what happened this time around with Mercedes. So far we are seeing car number 444 performing their pit stop. We saw them change the tires on the right hand side, and now it's time for the left hand side tires to go and be changed with brand new ones, as the car who's currently second in the GT4 standings will be then able to go on with its race, driving off into the sunset towards a potential podium finish in the category should they finish this race without any major problem. Of course, it's a very complicated operation, the pit stop phase. Everything needs to go smoothly and according to plan, with all tires, with the driver's change, with the cleaning operations, and now the car being booted once more, and the 444 is now up and running. Meanwhile, ARC Bratislava sees its two cars once again close to one another. The LMP3 is a full lap ahead of the GTX Huracan, I should say, with the two cars separated by a full lap, though the gap when the Lamborghini came into the pits some 10 laps ago was more than 10 seconds, which means that Lamborghini has been catching the back of the Ligier thanks to the fresher tires. But of course, a different strategy sees the Lamborghini at a disadvantage as of right now. We'll see whether or not things change, meaning that it could potentially become a fight for the overall win between the Lamborghini and the Ligier. Though of course that's some wishful thinking, especially for some of the fans still around, though they will thoroughly enjoy. And ARC Bratislava 1-2 as the home heroes are flawlessly tackling this historic 3-hour race. Car number 44 still in the lead. Car number 7 following close by. But of course, it's not over yet. Up the hill towards turns number 7 and 8. And now into turn 10. Before the last elevation change after turn number 12. Meanwhile, here is the Mercedes GT4 car number 4 for Lemma Racing, which has been trying very hard to keep the lead of the GT4 standings, as naturally such a complicated race is unfolding not just for one of the teams, but naturally for all cars as well, and the teams and drivers were now fighting for a spot on the podium in their respective categories, and of course for their classes wins, which, remember, gave out triple the amount of points compared to usual. Here is the sole Renault Clio, the 5th generation of that car, still running. Car number 23 of Lemma Racing in the lead of the TCC standings, with Duško Banjaglav and Hrvoje Beninic behind the wheel, alternating at the Renault Clio 5's wheel. We also saw briefly the LMP3 for ARC Bratislava. Meanwhile, DCR keeps on going with car number 992 for the GTC1 lead. racing towards turn number 2. As it stands, the GT4 car is still in 4th position, though 3 laps away from 3rd place. Here, the story is still ARC Bratislava being in a 1-2, and with both cars being very close to one another. We're waiting for the LMP3 car to enter the pit lane for what should be their final stop. As now the Lamborghini is closing in, and has done so for a couple of laps now. It's a very interesting moment of the race where teams have to stay concentrated as we are about to reach the 2-hour mark, which means that we only have about 71 minutes to go as of right now, which may seem little time compared to, of course, the 110 minutes we've already faced. But this is the most important part of a race itself. Concentration levels tend to drop, especially after the first couple of hours, and especially as a track becomes emptier and emptier and the classification gets stretched out even more. This usually makes it quite hard for the teams to stay concentrated. Meanwhile, we're seeing the 444 car proceeding quite slowly, I must say, through turns 1 and 2. So maybe some sort of issue for the car who's currently in 2nd position in the GT4 standings. But alas, it's the other Lemma racing car, the number 4, leading the GT4 class, currently in 5th, 2 laps behind 4th place, the DCR GTC1 car. Unfortunately, we now see 7 cars left out on track, and those 7 cars are from 6 different categories. The D5 class for prototypes, that sees car number 44 in the lead. The GTX standings with the Lamborghini Huracan of ARC Bratislava in 2nd position in the overall classifications. Then it's the GT3 category with the BMW number 220, that is the M6 GT3 of Racing Trevor. Then we have the GTC1 category with the Porsche Cup car of DCR. 5th place belongs to Lemma Racing in the only category that sees 2 cars still running, and that is the GT4 class with car number 4 of Ivan Kiampotec, Matias Lodi and Jan Primozic. 2 laps ahead of their sister AMG GT4 of Lemma Racing, Niko Pulic, Andrei Makarovic and Istok Armic. Last but certainly not least, it's the TCC class with Renault Clio tackling this race, and the sole one not just survived but entered the race was the Lemma Racing number 23 Clio of Dusko Benjaglev and Hrvoje Belnic. As now we see the Porsche handling turn 1. We saw a little off some minutes ago from the number 922 car, especially in that corner, meaning that things are starting to become a bit tougher for the drivers themselves. It was also a moment where the Lamborghini Huracan GTX was starting to lap the Porsche, so maybe a bit of difficult communication between the two of them, a miscommunication issue perhaps in the lapping procedure, though thankfully with no major consequences for neither team. As now the Lamborghini for ARC Bratislava still holds 2nd, racing together with the LMP3 Ligier, and this is a perfect time for us to remember you guys what the calendar is for this season. Calendar that sees 7 different weekends in 6 separated venues across the months of May through September. 4 months covering the 7 races. It is this one the second round of the season as the Slovakia Ring hosts the FIA Endurance CEZ Championship, just like it did last year. The first race of the season was the Red Bull Ring from the 16th to the 18th of May. The third round will be in Poland at Poznan from the 27th to the 29th of June, with Most and Czech Republic hosting round number 4 in July from the 25th to the 27th. The Slovakia Ring will then have a second race from the 22nd to the 24th of August before going once again to the Czech Republic, this time to Brno from the 5th to the 7th of September. Meanwhile, the last round of the season will be in Balaton Prague from the 26th to the 28th of September.
Duly noted.
Definitely, with a calendar that spans across 4 different months, and most importantly across some of the most important racetracks in Central Eastern Europe. We have, of course, the Red Bull Ring being one of the most iconic racetracks in the entire Europe as well, but also some tracks from lesser known countries to the world of motorsport, such as Poland, for example, with Poznan making an appearance. Meanwhile, we have car number 220 of Racing Trevor coming in for what could potentially be their last pit stop, with the leader of the GT3 class now into the pits for yet another stop, changing potentially all 4 tires, cleaning the windshield, and then refueling before going out on track for one final stint.
Yeah, we are in the window of the 65 minutes, which basically all the new generation of GT3 cars, Daniele, have been made, following what are the instructions from the reference point for GT3 Championship, which is GT World Challenge made from SRO, basically. So, yup, it could be exactly the last stint, as you say, the last pit stop, with maybe some lift and cost in the last part of the race, but as we know, BMW is usually working quite well in terms of consumption, and even technically this in Slovakia Ring, it's one of the tracks in which BMW has always historically been one of the most competitive. Those with some springs more than you in their ages as me can remember already when the Blancpain GT Series was coming here for the sprint in its first season, the 2014, with the Z4 at the time. Already BMW was pretty competitive in that situation. Now the M4 GT3 is definitely one of the models that brought back the constructor from Munich in one of the highest top level after a few seasons with M8 in the GT2 version, the GTE for endurance like Le Mans, Asia Le Mans Series and IMSA, and then the M6, quite a model that can be competitive, as was Mercedes. Not so lucky, because I see on the way coming through here already retired the AMG GT3 Evo, as well as a Porsche. Not so much luck, I have to say, for them, while looks like, looking at the standings so far for IRC Bratislava, it's quite a dominant race, this one, with the Miro Konopka team also this weekend in Le Mans for the collective test and the official registration day in the center of the town, with 2 drivers who had already the chance also to know quite well the international situation for motorsport, such as the professional drivers as Luca Ghiotto and Tom Dillman, involved both with the Slovakian team. So the Konopka family quite well known with this Lambo that we saw before, and as well the LMP3. Nevertheless, the LMP2 car, which was protagonist, which is actually protagonist in the ELMS and the WEC.
Of course, a team that needs no introduction, ARC Bratislava, the Slovakian racing team that has raced for a very long time in endurance racing as well, whereas another team that is quite accustomed to Eastern Europe racing, Lema Racing, is now in the pit lane, this time with the 444 car that looked to be struggling some minutes ago, now finally back into the pit lane. They are currently in 2nd position in the GT4 standings and 6th overall, and now the 444 car is starting what could be a final pit stop for one of the racing classes, the GT4, that has taken fans and constructors by storm in the last couple of years, of course becoming one of the most popular choices for racing so far.
Lema Racing, which is another team very well known in the Eastern Europe competitions, as well a team who trusted since the beginning the Mercedes GT4 in the spec that the Mercedes started the, let me say, entry level on the way to GT3. A car not easy to handle, to be say, technically speaking, but you know, with a lot of years of experience and with a track like the one of Slovakia Ring, which has very long straights and high-speed corner, I guess a car like the Mercedes can find a way to manage all its potential. But as you say, also strategy is going to be quite important, because we are in the last part of the race. So now making also some plans and strategy in what will be the time of the pit stop and the refueling can be very interesting for the final result of the race. Safety cars and yellow flags can help on this way. Drivers, of course, have to be very, very concentrated. We were speaking before, Danny, about the local heroes. Not very lucky Mato Homola, who had to be one of the first to retire in this race. A driver who had a chance to race as well in Slovakia Ring with World TCR ages ago. It was 2018 when he was racing with the Peugeot team. The chance together with now it's taking also Lema Racing his way from the pit lane to the track with Aurelien Comte. It was this pair racing with the Peugeot 308, the first patch of this car, which now in the TCR world had another chance to be back to life, as especially is in South America and in eastern countries like Japan. So yep, another not very lucky local hero that was champion in TCR Eastern Europe, a driver who had the chance to race a lot in Slovakia Ring, a track with many difficult turns, because turn 2, especially with TCR, with the front wheel driving, as we were talking about Mato Homola, it's a corner that you can try to make full throttle, especially when it was racing with the old GP3 specific car, which was a track this Slovakia where a lot of teams were coming to make private testing. Is not the corner which is now BMW, but will be the next one after this uphill on the downhill, then on the right. And is a corner that sometimes you can even try to manage to do full. You have to lift a bit with GT3 now, because of course it's different compared to the other kind of cars. But for example, a TCR, which has less power and downforce as well, the opposite open wheel cars, which have less weight and more downforce, have the chance to do that corner full throttle.
We saw it especially today throughout the other two races that we've commentated together, of course, Twingo Cup and Clio Cups, with drivers even trying some moves into turn 2, but the inside line being the best one to take, especially with Team Top car racing, and of course this weekend with TCR European Endurance on the grid as well. We saw how TCR cars are quite tricky to handle, especially in this first sector. We saw this with the Porsche Cup car as well, the DCR car that we're seeing now, the number 992, that started from 9th position and that is now up into 4th. We saw it going slightly wide into turn 1 20 minutes ago or so, and then struggling to find the pace back up. But of course, it is the only car standing in the GTC1 class. The Porsche Cup car, of course, being another very popular choice, not just in Eastern Europe, but in Europe and the world as well, with many different dedicated championships to a car that is quite tricky to handle, but that sees drivers make most of the difference, especially during race trim, as it is a car that is quite tricky to race with, but of course it's very, very satisfactory to bring to the top step of the podium.
It's a great opportunity to have the chance to see the Ligier LMP3 racing here, because ELMS had now a new era as well, Michelin Le Mans Cup, of LMP3 cars, a new generation, new engine, while we still have the chance to see the old patch of the Nissan engine, one, I have to say, in my personal opinion, of the best, especially in terms of sound for the guys and girls passionate of motorsport. So yeah, RC Bratislava gave us the chance to see a car that is coming to be one of the historic one. They can race, of course, in this series and as well in the Prototype Cup, so there is the chance in Europe to see in 2 series those cars. And we saw for a minute again the BMW GT3 in 2nd place overall, leader of the GT3 Cup, and as well we are back now in the Porsche, and as you say, quite interesting model, because we got Porsche Super Cup, Carrera Cup, which basically we have in every country, which is Italy, Germany, France, UK. So one of the best projects made from Porsche, which is one of the manufacturer which has its only series dedicated with a one make-off, as well the GT4 model, who race in GT4 Europe, and we saw before the GT4 Mercedes from Lena Racing. So quite interesting from Porsche this chance, because all the other manufacturers, for example, we have the Lambo still racing with Bratislava, who set the GT3 and the Super Trofeo, but not the GT4. This is quite a unique case, the one of Porsche, which set the GT4, the Carrera Cup, as well the GT2.
This just goes on to show how dedicated Porsche truly is to the world of motorsport racing. Currently the DCR team in 4th position, and we talked about the differences of the various cars, especially here with the GT3 category spanning across many different years. We saw the BMW M6 being the only one standing, but their team, Racing Trevor, was also bringing in BMW M4 GT3 Evo, the new evolution of the BMW Gran Turismo line. Of course, many differences between the M6 and the M4, the latter coming in the last few seasons to take the world of motorsport by storm, claiming very important victories all over the world, now racing in important championships such as the World Endurance Championship with the new GT3 spec, and of course now the Evo model starting to make its way through the ranks, especially in GT3 categories all over Europe.
It's interesting, we saw before for a while the LMP3, which we see back now, because this is a track which has never been in the calendar of official competitions such as the LMS or Michelin Le Mans Cup, and it's quite interesting to see the full potential of this car, which is literally flying today, because yeah, apart from Road to Le Mans, which is the race supporting 24 Hours of Le Mans, which will be held next week in the Circuit de la Sarthe, we've never seen so long straights for the LMP3 cars, because in tracks like, for example, Monza, you don't have much downforce, while in Slovakia Ring, of course, you need to have quite a high speed in terms of maximum speed, but also you need to bring downforce for the last part of the track. So it's a very interesting compromise in terms of technical challenge for the teams and for the drivers.
Especially, I have to say, sectors 2 and 3, as you were saying, are very difficult to tackle with a low downforce setup for each car, most importantly for an LMP3 prototype, which we now see for ARC Bratislava, tackling turn number 3 and entering into the second sector of the race. Still a 1 lap advantage over the sister car for the Slovakian team, as ARC Bratislava still has the Lamborghini Huracan in second position as well, holding the top spot in the GTX standings. Of course, not entering in the GT3 category given the modification that the Slovakian team has brought to the standard model of the Lamborghini Huracan car that has been racing in GT3 for quite some time now, whereas now we are with the Mercedes AMG GT4, of course one of the 2 models present here. We also had an Aston Martin AMR GT4. Unfortunately though, after the first hour of racing we lost the Yannick Motorsport Aston Martin, which are now stopped in the garage. They're now sitting in 11th position and out of the race after quite some time, especially now as we go into the last 54 minutes and 47 seconds of racing, as we now see the Porsche of DCR in 4th position, tackling the second half of the racetrack.
Quite interesting also to see Jesse Krohn in action, driver part of the rostrum of the official drivers of BMW, who has been sent here to give his support to the car, which is now in 3rd overall position. Quite interesting, the challenge with the GTX car, while he's entering in the pit the LMP3. As we said before, 65 minutes the fuel tank time estimated for a stint in GT3 car. Very shortly the one of the LMP3. It's quite interesting coming back in 54 minutes, because usually is about 44 or 45 minutes, so maybe they might have a splash and go in the final, or they will go with some lift and coast in the last stint. Let me see, yeah, 1 lap of advantage compared to the Lambo, which is now on the screen, coming through what is the straight bring to corner number 3. So yep, I mean, quite interesting, because if LMP3 should have another stop to do until the end of the race, this means that GT3 can technically overtake them. I don't know how Miro Konopka will manage the situation inside the team. If sportively side, the sportive director might have a good call for the strategy, but at the moment, strategically speaking, the 2 cars are technically open both for the win of the overall standings of this race.
We saw, especially in the second stint, how the LMP3 was easing off the throttle very early in the corners, lapping around 4 to 5 seconds slower than the fastest overall lap time in this race, which was a 1 minute 55.909, which curiously was also a 10th faster compared to the pole position time that we saw the Ligier LMP3 of ARC Bratislava managed to set in qualifying earlier today. Meanwhile, we see the BMW M6 lapping one of the Lemma Racing Mercedes as their race goes on without any issues so far. As for ARC Bratislava and their Lamborghini, we saw them entering the pit lane around 45-50 minutes ago, so we're expecting another stop pretty shortly, as the LMP3 seems to be released right about now from its pit box, so it will be making its way through towards the start-finish line. We briefly saw the LMP3 making its way through the fast lane of the pit lane, though we also saw the Lamborghini coming quite close into the frame through turns number 13 and 14. Here is the LMP3, and down there it's the other ARC Bratislava car, this time for the Lamborghini of ARC Bratislava in second position in the overall standings. The LMP3 so far in the lead, of course the two cars being into two different categories, the D5 class being for prototypes only, as we see the LMP3 on top of that standings, and then of course the GTX class for the Lamborghini Huracan. Meanwhile, the GTC1 standings with the Porsche Cup cars are dominated by DCR after an hour-long battle basically with Additis Racing that we saw go down to the wire after the first 60 minutes of racing. Unfortunately though, the Czech team had to pull out of the race following some issues that hit the car after 28 laps, and therefore we saw the number 38 pull into the pit lane and never coming back to the racetrack, as of course DCR is now the last car standing in the classification reserved to Porsche Cup cars, called the GTC1 standings, so far in fourth position overall. Behind them, of course, it's Lemma Racing with the two AMG GT4 cars separated by 4 laps. Car number 4 in the lead. Meanwhile, the 444 of Niko Pulic, Andrej Makarovic and Istok Armic are 4 laps behind in the 6th position overall, but crucially in second place in the GT4 standings. Last but not least, the other Lemma Racing car, the Renault Clio, the sole TCC car, entered in this historic 3-hour race for the FIA CEZ Endurance Series, part of the GT Cup series that has enjoyed a thorough rebrand for the 2025 season. As of course, this race is a staple of the calendar so far, as the Slovakia Ring has been on the FIA CEZ radar for quite some time now, and especially for the different Eastern Europe categories. We saw Clio Cup and the Twingo Cup do their job earlier today. We're going to see them tomorrow on Sunday, June 8th as well, with the other 2 series here at the Slovakia Ring Racing as well. It's going to be the last 2 races of the FIA European Truck Racing Championship, as well as stage number 2 for the TCR European Endurance. So now we see the Lamborghini of ARC Bratislava braking hard towards turn number 3, preferring once again more of a V-shaped entry to the corner, going hard on the brakes towards the apex, then getting a wider line through the center stage of the corner, before then once again getting a sharp turn in the final part of corner number 3. Meanwhile, here is the Porsche Cup car of DCR tackling one of the longest tracks, not one of the longest corners actually, not just of this racetrack, but of the entire season. An almost 270-degree turn to the right that brings the cars all the way around before the last small bend, the left-hander of turn number 14, to start yet another lap, which is the number 58 for the GTC 1 class leaders, the 992 driven by Danis Kalicki, with the DCR Porsche now going uphill and then downhill again in one of the many undulation and elevation changes around this very fun racetrack for both teams and drivers alike.
Up and down to this road.
Like a roller coaster, some would say.
I had another reference, a bit older, over the years.
Meanwhile, we see the Mercedes go into turn 1 with the number 4 car leading the GT4 standings, and here you can see the gap between the ARC Bratislava teammates. The Ligier now constantly lapping 3 seconds faster than the Lamborghini. Of course, two cars that are vastly different, not just in aerodynamics, but in power and in philosophy as well. Meanwhile, here is the Porsche once again, currently lapping in the 2-minute 13 marks on lap number 58, with 47 minutes and 35 seconds left on the clock. We're entering the last quarter of this historic 3-hour race. We haven't talked about the M6 GT3 in a while now, as the GT3 class leaders go uphill towards turn number 10. And then of course we have the Renault Clio as well, a car that is vastly used throughout Europe in its own series, of course. Clio Cup Europe being one of the most important championships for that car as well. We saw Clio Cup here as well with the Bohemian Championship tackling round 2 at the Slovakia Ring. We're going to see them tomorrow for race 3 early in the morning as well. Meanwhile, Lamborghini is tackling the 8th part of the racetrack, as naturally we see ARC Bratislava once again in a 1-2 for the moment. 46 minutes and 35 seconds still to go, as car number 44 now handles the penultimate turn of the 5.9-kilometer racetrack before lapping quite dangerously, I might say, the GT4 of Lemma Racing. There wasn't much room in between the two cars, but thankfully both of them are safe and sound into turn number 1. The Kolonka family watching on as ARC Bratislava are bringing home a thoroughly deserved 1-2 so far, though there's still plenty of time left for things to happen. This is exactly what I was talking about some minutes ago. Drivers need to stay alert, focused, especially in this final quarter of the race, given that anything can happen, not just in motorsport, but especially on this racetrack as well, and in a race of such nature.
I thought with safe and sound you were talking about capital cities.
I hoped it would be the case.
Either Taylor Swift
as well. I mean, two very good artists as well.
Pop music references are quite connected with motorsports,
as they should be, to be completely honest. But meanwhile, we have one of the cars off, and it is the LMP3 car of ARC Bratislava. The Ligier LMP3 looking to rejoin the track as of right now, but this could give the lead momentarily to the Lamborghini, which is exactly what's been happening as of right now. The 11-second gap now brought to 0 as the Ligier now makes its way back on to the racing line, as the car will try and go back to higher speeds. We'll have to see whether it was just a driving error or if a much bigger issue is to the car. Of course, now trying to clean off their tires.
Yeah, now the feeling for the driver, it's definitely really bad because you got dirty tires, as you said. You took a lot of gravel in, so definitely it's important to get support also from the team, because the engineers can see if something is wrong as well. Thanks to those images, they can check if everything is good on the car. Aerodynamically speaking, it looks like he's even approaching to lapping the GT4, so should not be anything broken in terms of drive shaft or suspension, and this is a good information. There is no issue with the tires unless a slow puncture, but so far looks like that the car can continue. Yeah, it just missed the apex, maybe just, I mean, being focused on something else, or even the sun, because it's changed quite a lot, the weather and the sky, because we got dark clouds coming, strange clouds to follow the line of the pop music, strange clouds coming over the track, and yeah, even changing with the sun coming down. The reference point for the braking point might be slightly different. This is already the second lap passing through the point where the car went out before, so I would say not technical problem, and this is the most important thing, because with 33 minutes left would have been very unfair from Karma to give IRC Bratislava this kind of treatment. And yeah, stuck in again another lapping car, so yeah, everything looks like fine, but as you said, the competition is get quite interesting now for the overall standing.
Truly is, as there's a 17-second gap now between the Lamborghini, who has been promoted for the first time today to the lead of the overall standings, and for the first time as well. Today we have a leader change. The LMP3 Ligier topped the standings from the start of this race up until the 43-minute mark, as of course the number 44 car is now trying to take corners at high speeds once more. The tires seem to be cleaner now, and the gap is starting to come down to the Lamborghini. Perhaps a lapse in judgment or in concentration, perhaps even just a small mistake coming into turn number 5, as it looked like. With the LMP3 car now back to racing speeds, we see it now into turns 10, 11 and 12, going uphill towards the back straight. We're going to see what the lap times were in the previous lap, of course losing more than 25 seconds on lap number 65 due to the mistake, with the Lamborghini lapping consistently in a 2-minute once, whereas now the cars are now much closer together. It was a 1 minute 59.2 for the LMP3, now gaining 2 seconds over the sister car of ARC Bratislava. Of course, there's still plenty of time to recover. There's only 15 seconds in between the two of them, but now strategy could potentially play a bigger role as well. We talked about the potential pit stop that the LMP3 car has to take in order to finish the race. We'll see if that is the case, or if the Lamborghini could potentially become the winner of the overall classifications, though of course we're waiting for car number 7 to pull into the pits for one final time today. We see how ARC Bratislava handles the situation. Meanwhile, the rest of the standings remain unchanged, with Racing Trevor in 3rd position, the BMW M6 holding on to the lead of the GT3 standings as well. The GTC1 category is so far dominated by DCR, being the sole Porsche 991.2 Cup entry still left in the race. GT4 Racing saw a very intense battle between Mercedes and Aston Martin in the first hour of racing, though then Yannick Motorsport have to wave the white flag and surrender first place to Lemma Racing, who's now into a GT4 1-2 in 5th and 6th position in the overall standings respectively, with their third car, the Renault Clio of Duško Banjaglav and Hrvoje Belinic, still at the top of the TCC standings, especially in 7th position overall. Here we are with the overall leaders and GTX contenders, with the Lamborghini Huracan of ARC Bratislava, a 2-minute flat .5, which is a very quick time, especially for this moment in time as the race goes on, with less than 40 minutes now on the clock, though the Ligier LMP3 is starting to show its prowess once more. A 1 minute 57.1 the last lap, which was 3 seconds faster than the Lamborghini. Now the gap only 11.9 seconds between the two of them. Meanwhile, DCR is going strong, as well as the other two cars left in this race, not counting the GT4 class, which we have seen plenty of in the previous 15 or 20 minutes or so. Here is the BMW M6 with Gregor Gigo, then it's Bajek and Jesse Kron, the number 220 car, still in the running for an overall podium place. It was looking very good for their sister car, the M4 GT3 Evo, also of Racing Trevor, driven by Antal Gigo and German driver Max Hesse, but unfortunately it wasn't to be for them, as trouble hit early on, as they had to retire after only 25 laps of racing before the end of the first hour. We now see the Mercedes of Lemma Racing, specifically the number 4 car, who's leading the GT4 standings. Ivan Kian-Potez, Italian Mattias Lodi and Miha Primozic, whereas now we see one of the cars that unfortunately had to retire early on. It was car number 22, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo of Mikenek Motorsport, of Jakub Knoll and Josef Jaruba, but they're now being brought back to their garage. Unfortunately not able to continue. They were looking quite good today, but it wasn't to be for the car that has finished the race in 9th position in the overall standings. And it was the sole entry of the GTC class. Speaking of Lamborghini, here is the ARC Bratislava number 7 car with Miran Adam Konopka together with Zeno Mikuláško, sharing driving duties between the Ligier LMP3 and the Lamborghini. This weekend, we see now the Huracan having a 9.1 second gap over the Ligier LMP3 of the Slovakian racing team. The difference between the two entries was 2.7 seconds in the last lap, with the Ligier dropping a 1 minute 57.9 compared to the 2 minute flat 0.6 of the Huracan number 7, now chased by the cameras throughout the second sector of the racetrack. Towards turns number 8 and 9. It's a very complex part of the circuit, of course, with hard braking zones, but at the same time a very difficult line to take, especially in the fast left-right corner after turn 3, where we saw many battles throughout the day. Whereas now we have images live from the pit lane as we see some cars getting ready to pit. There's 36 minutes left on the clock, so whoever comes into the pit lane now will potentially do their final pit stops ahead of the last stint of the race. Car number 7 still in front, car number 44 hot on their tail after a mistake that cost dearly to the Ligier LMP3 crew that lost over 30 seconds. But here we go with the Lamborghini Huracan of ARC Bratislava coming into the pit lane. We said that we were expecting a stop around the 40-minute mark. It's come 4 minutes later, so a bit of fuel saving on the Slovakian side of the garage, as now the number 7 car pulls into the pit lane. We're going to see the refueling on the right-hand side of the car, potentially even some tire changes, but of course we need to be done with the refueling part first before then going on with the rest of the pit stop. Seeing smoking hot brakes on the front end of the car, especially on the front right part of the Lamborghini, as the car is now being fueled up for the remaining 35 seconds of racing. No tire change, it seems. We're going to keep those tires on for the remainder of the race, and they can now rage on as the Ligier LMP3 of ARC Bratislava is now once again the overall classifications leader.
Yeah, splash and go, a bit more splash than go, considering that it's about half an hour left until the end of the time of the race. But yeah, as we say, making the count of how long the driving stint is for the cars of the GT3, about the 65 minutes. This car, it's even a little higher consumption, considering that it's the old patch of the Huracan, but yeah, quite normal. And as you say, no tire change because already left with half an hour. First of all, the track condition is going quite well, improving because the temperature is going down, so tires are still performing quite well. The main opponent, considering the one who is coming and not the one who is leaving, it's quite far away on the third position. That is the BMW, which we have seen already pitting at the beginning of the last hour of the race, so there was enough room to make this splash and go with some safe plan. So everything okay, I would say, everything under control for RC Bratislava, with yeah, as you say, the change of the leadership with the Ligier, the LMP3, which is coming back ahead of the GT3, which is a bit what we see in the Michelin Le Mans Cup, kind of an introduction of what will happen in Le Mans, with the LMP3 fighting against the GT3.
Yes, it's two cars that are very different, of course, in philosophy, aerodynamics and engine-wise, but of similar pace, especially on proper racetracks like this one. We saw only a 1.1 second difference in qualifying trim in favor of the Ligier LMP3, which is of course much faster in the fast, twisty sections of the track, though on straight lane speed alone, the GT3 are very competitive compared to the more nimble and aerodynamically focused LMP3 prototypes, especially with ARC Bratislava. We saw the difference in between the same team, with only 1.5 seconds in between two cars of very different categories. Of course, usually this difference is much higher in selected championships, but of course this also depends on the series BOP and of course the rules and regulations for each championship. Now, only 33 minutes left on the clock. We are getting ready to enter the final half an hour of racing in what is an historic event for FIA CEZ Endurance. Of course, the first ever 3-hour race transition from the 1 hour to a more standard endurance format, as this race gives triple the amount of points of a normal race. Of course, the other 6 in the calendar being normal 1-hour races. We saw them, for example, at the Red Bull Ring, as well as last year here at Slovakia Ring, and throughout the entire 2024 calendar. Now we see the Porsche of DCR tackling turns number 8 and 9 before the very long hairpin of turn number 10, slightly missing the apex there. Car number 992, though there's still plenty of time to find a very quick lap time, as of course this is now the objective for all the teams, trying to be as consistent as possible, especially in the last 31 minutes of racing, reducing the mistakes, especially for this car, the Ligier LMP3, which has the pace to stay on top of the standings, though a mistake like the one that we saw some 10-15 minutes ago could prove once again quite costly for the number 44 crew, who are once again in the lead, though it remains to be seen whether or not they can go until the end, as their last pit stop was around the 55-minute mark of the timer. As we see, with now 31 minutes to go, usually these cars go around 40 to 45 minutes on one tank of fuel, but it has to be seen the fuel saving ratio that ARC Bratislava is on, especially with the lifting coast, which is a very prominent tactic, not just in motorsport but on this racetrack as well, which features some very fast corners and some long straights. And here we see ARC Bratislava tackling the second half of the racetrack. Meanwhile, in the pits comes the DCR Porsche. Of course, it's been a competitive performance from them so far. Of course, being a front-engine car, it needs to be refueled on the front end, which is very different compared to other cars that we've seen throughout this race. Meanwhile, I think we just saw the Lamborghini come in as well for a second time in the last 15 minutes or so. So maybe another unplanned pit stop for ARC Bratislava. So far so good instead for DCR, as they are pitting for one final time. And as well, the Ligier LMP3 going strong with car number 44 now getting ready to perhaps lap the sister Lamborghini, as it has made its way into the pits once more, as we are now officially into the final half an hour of racing. Yes, we see the Lamborghini back in the pit lane, stopped at the pit box, so maybe an unplanned stop for the number 7 car. Meanwhile, wiping off the dirt off the windshield of car number 992 for DCR. Of course, very crucial now to have the best viewing conditions possible. We were saying this some minutes ago. Of course, we've had very different conditions throughout this race. We saw some very dark clouds in the beginning of the race. We even saw some drops of rain about 30 minutes in, and a lot of wind, especially in the final part of the racetrack towards turns number 12, 13 and 14, before of course seeing the sunlight appear at around the halfway stage. And now we have the DCR Porsche getting ready to take on the final 29 minutes of racing with a different lighting situation. Headlights being required as of right now, as of course it's starting to become pretty dark outside, though the sunset is not going to be on for yet another hour, as we're going to end this race under daylight conditions. Here we see the number 992 making their way out of the pit lane and back into the 5.9 kilometer racetrack for what is the final stint. It's going to be quite tough for the drivers now, especially as they're coming out of the pit lane with cold tires and a not full tank of fuel, but definitely more fuel than before. So it has to be, they have to be very cautious, trying to take corners with a bit less speed compared to usual. As we see the Lamborghini Huracan now out of the pit lane as well, being lapped by our Bratislava's Ligier LMP3 as well. I think this could settle the discourse regarding the overall race leader fight for P1, as the Ligier now has a 2-lap advantage over the Lamborghini Huracan in second position.
It's also very demanding psychologically side, because after 3 hours of race, 2 and 40, I lost now the time left until the end of the race. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be quite complicated also for the drivers, mechanics and the engineer as well. I mean, being focused and concentrated for the long time as well, because Slovakia Ring is a track in which you can never breathe. You are basically almost 100% of the time pushing. You need to be very concentrated. We have seen a lot of lapping cars, so not easy to manage also the traffic, and it's a very demanding situation.
Especially now for the GTX and GT3 categories, with the Lamborghini of ARC Bratislava now under attack from the GT3 and the BMW M6 of Racing Trevor, who's now under a lap behind the Lamborghini. Though of course we're now waiting for official confirmation once the cars will cross the start-finish line. Here we see car number 4 for Lemma Racing as they complete their final pit stop, and now they are out and about for this final 26 minutes and 30 seconds of racing, as the GT4 standings have been dominated by Lemma so far today, especially after the retirement of Yannick Motorsport and their Aston Martin AMR GT4 earlier on after the first hour and 20 minutes of racing. Here is the Ligier LMP3 starting lap number 75. 1 minute 59.5 was their final previous lap, of course being a good 3.5 seconds slower than their fastest lap of the race, meaning that they are managing the situation as of right now, not taking too many unnecessary risks. Of course, not letting the speed drop as low as they did before, when the concentration can start creeping in, which is when the mistake happened for car number 44 going wide into turn 5 in the gravel. And now we see a much more concentrated version of the number 44 crew in the final 25 minutes of racing here at the Slovakia Ring. Of course, round number 2 of the season, before heading over to Poznan in Poland for race number 3. One of the highest championships in Europe racing on the Polish racetrack, which we'll be doing so into 3 weeks time, from the 27th to the 29th of June. Meanwhile, the BMW GT3 here now with Racing Trevor, thanks to the unplanned pit stop for the Lamborghini Huracan, has jumped the ARC Bratislava car and is now up into second position. So is the Slovakian teams 1-2 under pressure now, as we saw Racing Trevor completing their final pit stop with 55 minutes to go, which is plenty of time for GT3 Racing to complete a single tank of fuel. And so we will be seeing whether or not Racing Trevor can stop ARC Bratislava from finishing in a 1-2 position in the overall standings. Of course, the two cars belonging to two different categories. The M6 belonging to the GT3 class, whereas the Huracan, now chased by the cameras, belonging to the GTX category. We'll see. The gap now is around 8 seconds, maybe even less, as the Lamborghini now crosses the start-finish line. In fact, it's a 5.5 second gap. The Lamborghini lapping 3 seconds a lap faster than the BMW, who's taking it quite easy, especially in this final part of the race. So we are about to maybe see an on-track battle for second position in the overall standings, as the Lamborghini is closing in on the BMW. We haven't seen a fight for position for quite some time now, especially given the different classes that the teams are on. But this is of course the beauty of the FIA CEZ Championship in the endurance format, compared to the sprint races that we usually have throughout their weekend with 2 25-minute races, which is in fact what basically we have left now in this 3-hour endurance event, as ARC Bratislava now tackles the final part of the race with the Ligier LMP3 now undisturbed in first place with a 2-lap advantage over Racing Trevor and the other ARC Bratislava entry with the Lamborghini Huracan. These latter two cars separated by 5.5 seconds on the start-finish line at the end of what was lap number 73 for them, and lap number 75 for the Ligier LMP3, the second generation of LMP3 cars. Of course, now the third iteration of the LMP3 project, racing in championships such as the Michelin Le Mans Cup and the Asian Le Mans Series earlier this year. As now we see Bratislava managing the situation quite well, especially for the LMP3 standings, as the clock has 22 minutes and 7 seconds left on it. As we see now the Lamborghini closing in on the BMW, the gap from 5.5 seconds has gone down to 3 seconds. It was a very quick lap for the Lamborghini with 1 minute 59.9, dropping below the 2-minute mark, whereas the BMW M6 is lapping with a 2 minute 02.5. Of course, the two cars being part of two different classes, which somewhat explains the difference in speed and pace. As here we can see the ARC Bratislava car number 44 with Miran Adam Konopka together with Zeno Mikulasko. You can see how the car bounces after the elevation change towards now turn number 5 and 6. Same goes for the Lamborghini, who is now within striking distance of the BMW M6. GT3 car being, of course, the sole runner for their class, up currently into second position, though with 20 minutes and 52 seconds left on the clock. It looks to be Lamborghini's time to shine once more, as they are coming in closer to the back of the BMW. Now the gap almost less than a second, especially given how difficult things have been for BMW lately pace-wise compared to the Lamborghini. There seems to be a contest close to none for ARC Bratislava. The Lamborghini now setting its sights on the BMW M6. This is a fight that we've seen in recent years, when the M6 was the prime choice for BMW Gran Turismo Racing from 2016 onwards up until the end of 2022, as now the M6 goes defensive towards the inside line as the Lamborghini pulls to the outside, though the much faster Lamborghini on a straight line, given the modifications that ARC Bratislava brought to the car's engine, meant that the car number 7 was no match for the BMW, as now we see ARC Bratislava once again being in a 1-2 position, as BMW has to settle for third place.
It isn't strange, because going on with the development of the car, what has been brought is special aerodynamics. So the car is new, and the slower it is in terms of maximum speed, because older car, especially also if you think to open wheel cars, for thinking about maybe Formula 3 or Formula Renault, same as Formula 4 now, which we had the chance to meet quite often with Eastern Europe and with the Chads. It brings quite a lot of aerodynamic news, so this brings the car to be a little bit slower on the straight, definitely a bit more stable in what is the mid-speed corner, but the same was for GT3. So the first model of the Huracan is definitely a faster car. I remember a few years ago when there was the change from Gallardo to Huracan, especially in racetrack like Monza, where the speed is of course much important than other tracks. That the Gallardo had quite a huge advantage compared to the Huracan, because the Huracan brought quite a lot of downforce, and these affect a bit the speed. The same was when we changed Formula 3, passing from 308 to 312, while it's going quite slow, the Porsche. Look at me approaching turn 3, maybe just miss one gearbox change. And so yeah, I mean, quite normal to see an older car in GT3 being sometimes faster in terms of speed than BMW, but maybe they were managing a bit the the consumption of the fuel, as we said before, for the last pit stop. So I mean, a bit of lifting cost in this part of the race, because we have seen this change of position on track.
In fact, BMW pitted around 20 minutes earlier than the Lamborghini, of course, and then the ARC Bratislava car having to pit once more around 20 minutes later due to unforeseen circumstances, which of course led them to lose the position in the first place. But now Lambo is back into second position with a 3-second gap over BMW. However, of course, Racing Travel will be happy with the GT3 lead and win as of right now, as they are the sole survivors in the GT3 class. It was very unfortunate to see a team as quick as Goodspeed Racing give out after just 1 hour of racing, with Piotr Vira behind the wheel of the team of the car set up by the team from Poznan. They will have their home race in 3 weeks' time to try and shine once more. A team that has raced in the Winter GT Series last year, and of course in the International GT Open throughout the last couple of seasons in selected events. ARC Bratislava now back in a 1-2 condition as of 5 minutes ago, with the D5 car, of course the prototype, the Ligier LMP3, leading, as it has been the case for all but 5 laps in this so far 78 lap race. Behind them, the other car of the Economica family, the Lamborghini Huracan, in second position, 2 laps behind the Ligier, and then in third place, of course, the BMW M6 GT3 of Racing Trevor. Behind them, it's the Porsche of DCR, now chased by cameras throughout turns 1 and 2, with car number 992 still in 4th position, but still rocking the GTC1 lead. Nothing has changed in the GT4 standings as well, with Lemma Racing in 5th and 6th, while the team also has an entry in the TCC standings, and that is the Renault Clio, who has successfully completed the first 2 hours and 44 minutes of racing. They only have 16 more minutes to go here around the Slovakia Ring to claim a TCC victory, with the Renault Clio and the 5th iteration of said car being driven here with car number 23 currently in 7th place in the overall standings. Lamborghini now roaring towards turn number 2. Of course, one of the better sounding engines in the GT3 field. Much louder sound compared, of course, to other cars such as GT4 compared to their GT3 counterparts. As Mercedes now handles turn 2 beautifully. It's a much different car, much slower, of course, in the GT4, which is a stepping stone for those drivers who are trying to make their mark in closed wheel racing, especially in Gran Turismo racing in their career, which of course one of the first stepping stones could be the Renault Clio Cup. We've seen the race of Clio Cup Bohemia happen earlier today. We're seeing race 2 tomorrow, and of course some of the drivers who we saw here are going to compete in those championships as well. Most importantly, Mija Primožić, who is right now leading the GT4 standings with Mercedes and Lemma Racing. He's going to go back with the same team tomorrow for Clio Cup. And the same for David Živok, who raced in the first hour with Additis Racing and the Porsche 991 car in the Cup standings. Unfortunately having to retire after just 1 hour and 5 minutes, though after that it's going to be smooth sailing for him tomorrow, as he is one of the most competitive drivers in the Clio Cup Bohemia Championship, finishing on the podium today and trying to do this tomorrow.
Approaching happy hour time, we see also the lights switching on the cars, because still few dark clouds are coming on the Slovakia Ring. We have been very lucky so far, to be honest, looking which was also the weather forecast expectation, quite low, because it was about 25-30% of chance of rain, but you know, it's quite complicated, especially getting through the summer, have these summer storms coming to destroy your race. It's about 30 minutes left, so still we are not safe, but so far it went quite well.
Yes, we only saw some drops of rain after 30-35 minutes of racing, especially into turns 3 and 13. we saw them through the onboard of the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing with Mato Homola and Victor Mraz. Unfortunately, though, they had to retire after just 45 minutes of racing due to unforeseen circumstances and a technical issue on the fuel side of things for the KTM.
We have been quite lucky because we had a lot of wind, so these brought the clouds but also throw them away, which maybe would have been one of the reasons for the mistake. We didn't consider it when the LMP3 went on the gravel before at the beginning of the last hour. Maybe some wind arrived in a difficult moment because LMP3 is the only car who had a wave in the middle of the car, so it is definitely affected more than GT cars if there's some strong wind coming. So yeah, that could be maybe another point that we didn't consider during the live, but why not?
There has been some very strong gusts of wind so far today. We saw them especially in the first hour, but even in the second half of the race as well, as now the Ligier is once again crossing the start finish line with just 12 minutes left on the clock, so a bit over 6 laps left to go. This could be the 7th to last for this 3-hour race, as ARC Bratislava is enjoying a 1-2 at this moment in time. We saw the BMW getting quicker and quicker throughout the last few laps, once again flirting with the 2-minute flat lap times, a 2-minute flat 0.6 for the BMW, a 2 flat 0.3 for the Lamborghini, who still holds a 4.6 second gap over BMW, though that isn't good enough to rest on their laurels, as of course the Lamborghini has a very slim margin over the BMW M6 of Racing Trevor, who's still pushing quite hard and keeping Lamborghini honest in this final part of the race. Behind them, we saw Porsche making their way through some lap traffic as the GT4 cars were standing in the way, though of course our drivers being very polite and alert on the track, making it easy for them to make way to faster cars, as it's been the case so far, and as it always is for endurance racing, with many different classes, 7 to be exact in this race, represented by a plethora of vehicles, as now we see one of those cars, the Mercedes-AMG GT4, being driven to success by Lemma Racing, with a historic Team 1-2 so far in the class, currently in 5th and 6th position in the overall standings as well. It's getting darker and darker, as we said some minutes ago, and we saw that with this very good angle of the yellow lights on the Mercedes GT4 car of Lemma Racing. Meanwhile, ARC Bratislava is still pushing, still going strong with car number 44, as naturally the Lamborghini behind is trying to consolidate second position. Now the gap being 7.7 seconds, BMW seem to have lost their edge, but here they are running in 3rd place, running in the lead on the GT3 standings, and of course still on the podium in the overall classification, with Racing Trevor in 3rd place, Gregor Žigo, Denis Bajek and Jesse Krohn at the wheel of the now outdated BMW M6, but still a very competitive race car in a series as diverse as the FIA CEZ Endurance, part of course of the GT Cup series for the Eastern Europe Championship, as we now see the Lamborghini Huracan and the BMW back-to-back in 2nd and 3rd place respectively. Just 9 minutes now on the clock, which means around 4 to 5 more laps of racing for the Ligier LMP3 of ARC Bratislava, who are still leading the way. Mercedes meanwhile holding down the fort in the GT4 standings. It's been a race of attrition for sure, given the nature of it, though. We couldn't expect anything less. That is the word of endurance racing, and we wouldn't have it any other way, as Lemma Racing holds positions 5 to 7 with 2 AMG GT4 cars and a Renault Clio of the 5th generation, which we're going to see tomorrow as well in the morning. For race number 2 of their second round, there's also going to be the Renault Twingo Cup going on with the opening race weekend of the season for them. Not to forget, of course, the FIA European Truck Racing Championship as the main event for this weekend, as well as TCR European Endurance making their first appearance here at the Slovakia Ring in 2025. As we now see the BMW of Gregor Gigo completing yet another lap, the 81st of their race, starting at lap 82, fourth to last in their effort today, which has been a very valiant one, especially from start to finish, being the most consistent GT3 car out of the entire field, not making a single mistake so far in the first 2 hours and 53 minutes of racing. The same can be said actually for the GTX Lamborghini of ARC Bratislava, though a non-scheduled pit stop around 20 minutes ago put them out of contention for the overall win, and of course put them at risk of losing second place against the BMW M6 of Racing Trevor, though that ship seems to have sailed for the team that is now holding third position in the overall standings and the lead of the GT3 class, with 6 minutes and 35 seconds left on the clock. Once again, ARC Bratislava dominating with the Ligier LMP3. We saw the same happen at the Slovakia Ring last year, and of course throughout the season, as well as the opening round of the 2025 iteration of the championship, as Hironaga Konopka took the win back at the Red Bull Ring 2 weeks ago. As now we see all cars getting ready to cross the start-finish line for what is probably the third to last time, as Konopka Jr. now racing on in the Lamborghini. Tackling turn 1 once more for the 83rd time today. Very quick 201.3 was the last lap for GTX Lamborghini compared to a 204 flat for the BMW M6, which seems to have waved the white flag in the fight for second position. Meanwhile, at Bratislava, we're going to celebrate a thoroughly deserved 1-2 on their home track, of course, being just 35 minutes away from Bratislava itself. The car being as quick as ever, especially on this part of the weekend, with now Porsche in 4th position and ARC Bratislava enjoying a 1-2 so far.
Quite different and interesting to see different cars and class at the top of the standings for this 3-hour race, with still some lapped cars which are approaching in the final minutes. We are about 2 laps before the checkered flag coming, because it's 4 minutes and a half left before the end. And of course we are following the leader car approaching out turn 1.
That is the LMP3 of ARC Bratislava, with just 4 minutes and 10 seconds left on the clock, with the Slovakian outfit doing everything they can throughout this race. 3 hours separated them from victory. They feared that the endurance factor could play a decisive role, but that was in favor of them actually, especially after 3 long hours of grueling racing. We know that reliability is for sure one of the most important factors to consider, as we see some brave fans who have stayed throughout the entire 3 hours on the grandstands cheering their favorite drivers on. We saw a lot of people throughout the day, and we're going to see the same tomorrow for the final few races of this very exciting race weekend here at the Slovakia Ring, as now we see Nema Racing dealing with the final couple of laps in the GT4 standings. It looked to be a race-long fight with Yannick Motorsport and their Aston Martin AMR GT4 car. Unfortunately, the number 73 entry was out of the running after 80 minutes, thus leaving Nema Racing to take an unbothered 1-2 in the GT4 standings. As now the LMP3 of Arc Bratislava is rounding out the penultimate corner of the racetrack, then through the very fast left-hand bend that connects the penultimate corner to the start-finish straight for what is the penultimate lap of this 3-hour event, starting right now as Arc Bratislava is inching ever closer to a 1-2, as it has to be said that the Ligier LMP3 is not hanging around in this final part of the race. At 1 minute 57.7 is quite a fast lap, especially with worn tires, and after 3 long grueling hours of racing. The Lamborghini behind is currently with a 2 minute 01.6, the second fastest car on the field. Behind them the BMW M6 of Racing Travel as well, being in third place. The 204 flat, third fastest car out there. Listen to the roar of the Lamborghini going uphill towards turn number 2, almost taking it flat out. We saw it on board with the KTM Crossbow of Karin Racing as well in the opening stint of the race. It was a very difficult corner to take on flat, not managing to do so, especially in the first few stages where maybe drivers were a bit more cautious with a higher fuel load and of course with a lot more traffic compared to now where only 7 cars stand after 2 hours and 59 seconds. Whereas right now we enter in the last minute of official racing. Then of course we will be completing the final lap once the clock strikes 0, as the Lamborghini now goes through turn number 10, and the Ligier of Arc Bratislava is about to start the final lap of this grueling 3-hour race here at the Slovakia Ring, a first ever time for FIA CEZ Endurance, taking the endurance race format to a whole new level, upping the race distance from 1 hour up to 3, as now the night is truly starting to creep in at the Slovakia Ring, and Arc Bratislava is starting the final lap of the race. The Ligier LMP3 starting to be faster and faster as the fuel load goes down, at 1 minute 56.9 for them. Once again dropping below the 1 minute 57 mark, only 1 second far slower actually than the fastest lap of the race, which was set in the opening stages of the race. The Ligier LMP3 doing such a fantastic job throughout this race, just a little off in this corner, turn number 6, now 40 minutes ago or so. But the rest of the race has been absolutely flawless for the number 44 crew, who is now approaching the final stint, the end of the final stint, and the end of the final lap itself, as the clock strikes 0 right about now, and we are into the final lap of the race. The marshal's getting ready to wave the checkered flag at the end of this lap. Car number 44 enters the final sector for one final time, going uphill and then down towards the back straight. Connects turns 12 to turn 13 and 14. So one last braking zone for Arc Bratislava in the Ligier LMP3. It's been a race of attrition, as we said, throughout this 3-hour event, but at the end of the day, the result doesn't change. It's still Arc Bratislava taking the checkered flag and winning the 3-hour event for FIA CEZ Endurance. A phenomenal display of grit, talent and prowess for endurance racing, for a team that has had its fair share of experience in this context. It's a 1-2 for ARC Bratislava and a win in their respective classes, the D5 category for Ligier and of course the GTX class for the Lamborghini Huracan, who is now coming around the final bend of the racetrack, ready to take the checkered flag again with the second car too. And it's a phenomenal 1-2 performance for ARC Bratislava as car number 7 wins the GTX standings as well. It's going to be a success for third place finishers for Racing Trevor as well, taking the win in the GT3 category this time around and taking home triple points because of the new format here that makes this race as important as ever for the championship standings. Here it is, the BMW M6 of Racing Trevor crossing the start finish line. Phenomenal effort for Gregor Gigo, Denis Vajek and Jesse Krohn. Behind them it's Porsche with DCR taking the win in the GTC1 standings with car number 992, and Lemma Racing takes home victory in both the GT4 standings with a phenomenal 1-2 with car number 4 in the lead and the 444 car in second position. And then in TCC it's the Clio Cup of the 5th generation, car number 23 taking home victory. And here it is around the final corner, rounding out this incredible 3-hour event that sees the Renault Clio cross the start finish line right about now and take the win in the TCC standings, as the Clio now slows down to a lap performance. We also see the Mercedes behind of Lemma Racing taking the checkered flag, and we are done and dusted with this 3-hour race here in FIA CEZ Endurance, and a win for ARC Bratislava in both the D5 and GTX standings, but most importantly in the overall classification as well, thanks to a phenomenal effort from all the team in both the LMP3 and GTX side of the garage, as the prototype takes the overall victory and the GTX Lamborghini Huracan takes home second position. And here we see the highlights for this incredible 3-hour race. And those were the highlights of the 3-hour FIA CEZ Endurance race. It's been a fantastic time here at the Slovakia Ring, and as the day comes to a close, this is the final result. Thanks for staying with us. I want to thank Antonio as well for staying with me for the final hour of racing.
My pleasure, Daniele.
And of course, with the racing, we'll see you guys tomorrow on Sunday, on the 8th of June, for the remainder of the program here at the Slovakia Ring. Thanks for staying with us, and goodbye.